And Mr. Mayor, we should be live and ready when you are.
All right, sounds good. Go ahead and call the meeting to order for a regular meeting of the Soldovia City Council, Monday, April 26th, now 6:18 p.m. Roll call, Sweat,
Here.
Colberg,
Here.
Morrison, Rojas,
Here.
Peyton, still there, Harmony?
I'm here.
Okay. And Mr. Nathan doesn't look like he was able to make it, and we'll consider him excused. We know he had some stuff going on this evening. We do have a quorum. If everyone will join me in the Pledge of Allegiance, please.
For which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, excused absences. We have Nathan. Agenda approval.
I make a motion to
I'll
approve
make a-
the agenda.
I'll
Second.
second that.
Okay, looks like we have a motion to approve by Sweat, second by Colberg. All those in favor, Sweat,
Aye.
Colberg,
Aye.
Morrison, Rojas,
Aye.
Peyton,
Aye.
Nathan. Oh, excuse me, Nathan's gone. Motion is passed. Agenda is approved. Item E, consent agenda. All items under the consent agenda are approved with a single motion, no discussion, and one vote. Council member may request to remove an item for discussion and a separate vote. Tonight, there'll be no approval of minutes. The minutes for the regular meeting, April 12th, will be provided at the May 10th meeting. We have no payment approval report, and number 3 on the consent agenda is ordinance 2111. And there is the header in this is not correct. I'll read the correct header here in just a second, as soon as I can find it. 2111 is actually titled an ordinance of the Soldovia City Council amending the fiscal year 2021 budget for the general, water, sewer, dock, boat haul out, harbor, senior meals, Lollipop Park, Soldovia Cemetery, CARES Act, and a major maintenance and repair funds. Those are the items tonight on the consent agenda. Does any member wish to discuss and remove any items to discuss it separately? Okay, hearing none, I'll look for a motion to approve the consent agenda.
I'll make a motion, Mr. Mayor, to approve the consent agenda.
Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Rojas to approve the consent agenda, second by Colberg. All those in favor, Sweat,
Aye.
Colberg,
Aye.
Morrison, Rojas,
Aye.
Peyton.
Aye.
Motion is approved, 5-0. Item F, mayoral proclamations. We have none tonight. Item G, public presentation, prior notice. Tonight we have Brad, and I won't say your last name, Brad, because I'll mess it up, and Carrie Ann Baker, both from HEA, and this will be an introduction of new Director of Member Relations.
Thank you. Hey, good evening. My name is Brad Janorski, General Manager at Homer Electric Association. Many of you have met me before, so I got to tell you, I'm excited to be here tonight. This is the first public meeting I've had to speak at or had the opportunity to speak at in over a year. So I love coming here, and it's a great place to start. So with that, thank you, Mr. Mayor, for putting us on the agenda tonight. And most importantly, I wanted the City Council and the other folks here to meet our new Director of Member Services, Carrie Ann Baker. And she replaces Bruce Shelley, who has retired. And as you know, prior to Bruce was Joe Gallagher for many years. And I gave Carrie Ann a brief tour earlier today, and there's lots of history here. So before I keep going with a short update. Carrie Ann, if you just want to say a few things, please.
Hi. Can you guys hear me okay? All right, thank you. I'm really excited to be here. This is also my first public meeting back, and I think it's a really great place to start. I got to walk around the town. I've been here several times before. So I may not be as funny as Joe, and I'm certainly not as tall as Bruce, but I am committed to working with you. And I understand HEA's special relationship with Soldovia, and I hope to continue it. So I've given my card to your city manager, Heidi, and she has my number. And I just look forward to working with all of you. Oh, pleased to meet you.
So with that, just a couple of brief updates, and I really appreciate the information that Erin provides you guys on a pretty regular basis, and that's appreciated. She does a great job. Probably one of the most well-versed directors I've worked with in a long time. And as you can tell by my hairline, it's been a while. So kudos to you, Erin. One of our goals is to try and get over here during the winter season, or at least the storm season, at least once a month. And as you guys know, if any questions come up in the meantime, we try to be as responsive as possible. And so with that, but in the summer season or the late spring and early fall, when there really isn't a lot of activity going on, and you guys know when the activity is going on is you just got to look at your lights. And if the lights are on and there's nothing exciting, you probably won't see us unless you call us up, or we'll come over on a maybe quarterly basis. But in the late in the year, as you guys know, it gets pretty wild over here, and really across our entire system, it gets pretty crazy. So with that, part of our brief update I've got tonight, guys, just to give you a little update on some of the units we've got running here. The 2 generation units here, we run them through monthly tests, and maybe Bruce has already told you that. And our last set of test runs, they ran great. We continue to make maintenance changes to them like you do with any mechanical device. And, but they ran excellent. And the last time we actually used them for our system was March 10th through 12, when we had some trees on the line out towards Jackie Bay. And we also had a neutral down during a wind or snowstorm. So they worked just as expected. They worked great for us, and we had no problems. Most of you are probably aware, but when we start those units up, sorry, I don't mean to have my back to you. When we start those units up, we usually bring on Port Graham generation as well. And then we'll isolate them from this area just to keep the load balanced on those units, which has been one of the challenges we have throughout the year, is keeping the balance within the tolerance of those generators. So Port Graham usually runs on their own once we understand what's going on. So far, they've been operating great. So we haven't had any problems. One of the challenges we have worked on, and we'll be working on this summer for projects, is we've got devices called SCADA-mates out on the line. And what SCADA-mates do is they're much like the circuit breakers you have in your house. If you get a short circuit, let's say you've got a bad toaster or something, that circuit breaker will trip when it pulls too much load. We've got similar devices on our system. So when a tree falls on the line, or if a line hits the ground due to a broken insulator, most times it will trip offline and it'll break a circuit breaker, except we call them other things. In our case, we call them SCADA-mates or reclosers. The neat thing about these SCADA-mates is they're also hooked to a communication devices. So unlike your circuit breaker at home, where you've got to go into your service entrance, into your panel, see which one shows red or tripped, these send us information, usually via microwave or radio, back to our dispatch center to tell us that it opened up. So nobody has to physically go there. We have struggled over recent years on the communication side with those devices. So one of the things we're going to do this summer is we're going to go replace them, particularly between Big Tutka and Jackie Bay. McDonald Spit and Big Tutka, I think, is where they're going to go. We're going to replace those older units with new reclosers and some communication devices that allow us much more reliable communications between the line devices and what we've got back than what's in there today. So part of that'll help. We're putting up, getting on somebody else's tower up on Diamond Ridge, which will give us a better shot to this area. So hopefully it'll be much easier for at least our dispatchers to see where the problems are earlier. So weather permitting. And then the last thing we've got going on that I made a note of, and actually working on a response to Heidi with the Soldovia plowing crews, city employees plowing snow in the winter months. One of the things we're going to do is go through and provide the city a map of where our facilities are, both on a web-based platform and probably paper as well. But then we'll also physically go look at them, and in areas where we see transformers or J boxes that are anywhere near snow plows ability to reach, we'll put flags on them. We do that on the rest of our system, quite a bit of it. I know I've got one. All the ones by my place have them. They're just big, long fiberglass rods that stick up. So when we get 3 feet of snow, they're still 3 feet above, and they're reflective, so you can see them at night, which is usually when the crews are trying to find them. So, and then lastly, I'll let Carrie Ann close with the last thing I had on my list to cover today.
Okay, just wanted to remind everyone that our annual meeting is May 6th at 6 p.m. Registration is live already. You can go to our website. And then we are going to bring back our area meetings. We are going to do them in person. So you can look for those meetings sometime in the fall, probably the last week of August or thereabouts. And we'll be in touch and let everyone know when that is. So thank you.
Any questions for Carrie Ann or myself?
Yeah, if I might, Mr. Mayor,
Yep, go ahead, Pearlie.
is these new units, are them going to give us a jump in our kilowatt hours for price? And I thought these transformers were set up that they would try to reset themselves 3 times. Is that?
No, you won't see a price change because of that new equipment. The older equipment's fully depreciated. So, and really our system is so big that even if we threw it in the rate base, it's the weather will have a much greater influence on electric rates than these line devices that we put in or replace. As far as you had made the comment about transformers, there are reclosers on the line. And reclosers, depending on how you set them up, a lot of times we do have them, hence the term recloser is when we get a short, it'll give you 2 quick interruptions, and that's when your lights start blinking. And then a third one will be longer. And if it gets to the 4th one, there's still a fault in the line, it stays off. And the purpose of that, of course, is if you get a branch that's just brushing it, if you've ever grabbed a hot conductor before, you're stuck there. That reclose allows it to break free, whether it's an animal or a branch or something like that. And that's what those momentaries are. But don't forget, just because the line's on the ground, that doesn't mean the line's de-energized, because like the circuit breakers in your house, you have to pull a certain amount of load or current. And if it's on the ground, especially if it's got a highly resistive or you end up in snow, it could lay there fully energized. And our generators just think you just added another load to the system. So what do? They just add more fuel. And there that hot line is just thinking it's serving another load or another home or business until it gets a good enough conduction to earth that'll actually draw enough fault current where it'll trip that device. Good question though. Anything else?
Any other questions?
Mr. Mayor, if I may.
Yep, go ahead, Vivian.
Yeah, Brad, welcome, and thank you for coming to Seldovia, and welcome Carrie Ann to the HEA crew. Real quick, Brad, what is the update on the communication system that you're going to try to set up so Seldovians would know what the status is of the power from HEA?
Sure, great question. Thank you, and thanks for the welcome. We have our IT department working, and I believe they've already tested some of the text messaging capabilities. And we're actually using this area as our pilot project. So if it works, we'll run with it across our system. And so that's the latest I heard. Carrie Ann, have you heard anything else?
No, that's exactly true, Brad. And one of the reasons we're using everyone here as a test is just how much you communicate. It makes it really easy for us to respond and start here as a first source. So we'll probably go through a process where we clean up our membership list and the communications. We make sure we have the phone numbers that you actually want on file. And then one of the things we're really mindful of is we want to make sure we're not texting somebody in the middle of the night if they don't want to be texted. So we're going to go through a whole process just to make sure that that we communicate with you in the best way you want to be communicated with. So you can look forward to hearing from us a little more often on that front end as well.
Thank you.
Bobby?
Thank you. Yeah, Vivian, thanks for that question because I was going to ask that. But the other, well, it's not a question now, I guess it's a comment. I want to thank you guys for the line of communication that's been happening lately. And I think a lot of it is due to Aaron, and a lot of it is due to the whole administration and to us because we ask questions all the time. So I want to say thank you, Aaron, and thanks to you guys for really stepping up and letting everybody know what's happening a little bit more often than we used to get the information. We really appreciate that.
And thanks for those comments. We do appreciate it. And I think you hit on a key thing is we'd much rather hear from you guys than for you guys to have to talk to each other about what we're doing wrong, because there's nothing we could do about it if we don't know about it. And so if our members let us know, we are very responsive. And I got to say, our board of directors, as long as I've been at HEA, has always been extremely responsive to members across the system when they bring issues up. So they certainly do everything they can to err on the member side, at least to the extent that usually if there's any handcuffs, it's by the Regulatory Commission of Alaska, but that's a different story.
And you probably don't want to hear those things that we say amongst ourselves. So anyway. Thank you again.
You bet.
Yeah, we had some crazy storms this winter, and that was a perfect opportunity with folks being stuck at home to experience those. And obviously the one positive that came out of that was we were able to get our lines of communication with HEA, some things sorted out, and I think a lot of improvements overall. I think the community's getting much happier, and certainly now people are being made aware much quicker, and those questions are being answered. So we appreciate all the steps you guys are making, obviously, to help us over here on this side. So yeah.
Thank you, Mayor.
Yep, go ahead, Perley, if you have a follow-up.
Yeah, another question. Aaron had touched base on some kind of a battery backup system that's going to be installed somewhere. Do you know that, Aaron?
The big battery, but Brent can talk about it if you'd like.
What I was wondering is that up and running, and have we already seen the increase in our kilowatt hour price?
No and no. Great question. We are putting in a Tesla Megapack up next to our Soldotna generation facility. It was scheduled to be online around July 1st. We received notice from Tesla that due to the pandemic, that timeline is pushed back, so they'll actually get delivered by the end of July. And then we will do everything we can to make sure they're integrated at least before the winter season starts. I'm expecting by October 1st, we have them fully integrated. And those batteries are, we're going to see some real benefits from them. I'm really excited about it. Some of it has to do with the way our system is laid out and the extra capacity or spin we carry, especially when we're islanded from Anchorage. And we will no longer be burning fuel to carry that spin. We can just rely on those batteries. That will be really neat. Plus, we are looking at some large-scale renewable projects that are non-firm. So whether it's wind or solar or whatever, when it comes and goes unexpectedly, the batteries will help carry us over. Those batteries are large enough, and we went out for bids on them, but we got more than what we needed. But because of the economies of scale, it was a price we couldn't pass up. So quite frankly, in this time of year, we could probably power the HEA's entire system with those batteries for 2 hours. So they're amazing. Yeah, they are amazing. So they will have a big impact, not only for us, but quite frankly, all the way to Anchorage. So we are right now, although they're moving forward, we're still out there trying to pursue some grant funds for those and some other projects. As you guys are probably aware, both the federal level, the administration is very pro-renewable, pro-storage and stuff like that. So we're tracking that down.
So that 2-hour lifespan of fully charged batteries, that would be for the whole system? Can you isolate that into legs doesn't have to charge the whole system, that it would give the batteries more lifespan?
Oh, absolutely.
Not lifespan, but
Longer duration, you bet. We could, if we wanted to, but it'll be connected to the transmission system. So we could segment our transmission system or use it on top of, say, an existing unit that's running. If we're running, let's say Soldotna are running it at 40 megawatts and our load's at 60, we could take that extra 20 megawatts off the battery for another 4 hours before we have to worry about bringing another unit online. So it will be a really neat opportunity. And for us, the biggest savings are going to be both in fuel, as opposed to carrying another unit, firing it with fuel and not producing any electricity. And also, and I think you guys have heard me in the past, many of you, we are 90% dependent on natural gas today. And as those gas prices keep escalating, that represents almost 1/3 of your electric bill each month, just gas. And the last time we went out for bids for natural gas, we had one bidder, one qualified bidder in Hillcorp. That was it. And that's really not a good place to be. So we're kind of at their mercy. And they've done a good job, but boy, it's expensive. And it's not getting any cheaper.
just one quick follow-up. Do you had to buy, when you bought the batteries, you ended up getting more batteries than you needed? Are those spare batteries up for sale?
No, we got all we needed, but in the mid package, it came out economically. It's like the price per unit was amazing. So it was.
I mean, basically, we could get less for the same price, or we could get more for the same price. Like, we got all the other bids were basically more or less the same price as what we got, but less than.
That's right. Thank you.
Brad, does this work at that substation right along the Sterling Highway, or is this somewhere else in town? That's the one right along the Sterling,
Yep.
between Soldotna and Sterling right there?
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. Mr. Mayor. Right next to the golf course.
Yeah, and I saw they started like the next phase of that that's closest to the road. Is that all the battery work, their battery?
Yep.
bank?
Correct.
Okay.
So the far side of that is where all the pads are going to be for they're going to deliver the mega packs. They'll show up. We'll have a crane come in 1 week. They'll set them all right in place.
I saw all those little the individual pads
Yep.
there. Okay.
Yep. Right now, the contractor's putting all the terminations in for the wiring. So it's almost plug and play by the time they get here. And then on the closer to Soldotna side, that's going to be the power production center, PDC. I think that was it. Power distribution center and some other equipment. So it will be a really nice setup. So.
Awesome. That's good news.
Yeah, and I'm sure by our area meeting, I'll have lots of new updates that will be worth coming to. Besides the subways, I know they're good too. So.
All right. Any other questions? No one, I don't see any hands up from anyone in the public there. Okay. Any final questions for HEA from council? Anyone else in the audience? Yep.
I have a piece of property that I'm developing and hoping to get either wind or solar. And I spoke with Aaron about it at one point. Oh, I thought they could probably hear me okay. Anyway. My light bill will go down to a certain point if I'm running off my own resources, but then it stops. There's always going to be a fee for having the line hooked up, is the way I understood it from Aaron. Does HEA ever work with people and help them to set up like a wind generator or some kind of other resource, be it solar panels or whatever? Does HEA work with people like that, and will HEA buy power from individuals to feed back into the lines?
Sure, and that's a great question. And I think what you're referencing is our net metering program. There was a time where we'd provide opinions on different renewable packages for our members, but then the vendors got really angry with us and so we just said, you know what, do your own due diligence. And a lot has changed since we were doing that. Whether it's the tax credits or even the price of those systems have come down significantly, is my understanding. So because everybody's different, really our folks, our expertise is in large scale projects, large scale hydro, large scale everything. We're more on the utility scale as opposed to the electrician scale. So we really got out of that. We do have some financing programs for members, both for the equipment. We've got a line of credit program up to, I think it's $10,000. Looking for Erin to nod her head, yes. And so we do finance it if necessary, but we really encourage you to work with one of the local vendors because they'll have the details on the latest in tax credits and stuff that's available that we just don't keep up on as much. But we do have a net metering program in place that's approved by the Regulatory Commission that we will buy back excess power that you use. And so it works pretty good.
And by excess, by the thing you said about there being, basically a fee to, that you always have to pay every month just for being connected, that's true. But that excess buyback is if you're on the net metering program and you make more power than you use, you have to pay that $40-ish, but then you also, that can be ratcheted down a little bit by selling back that excess. But the excess that you sell back is wholesale price. So you can use stuff you use yourself, you get credited at your full retail 24-cent rate. But if now you don't have any more use and you're selling it back, you're just like any other wholesale seller of power, and that you get about 8 cents per kilowatt hour for that. So it's good to understand that.
Yeah.
And they have to be really political about this, but I'd say that if you want someone on this side who knows how to at least do solar systems, Andy Lawrence comes over quite a lot, and he's a solar installer. And
I'm kind of leaning more toward wind, but
yeah, and I don't know that there's anybody that I know of, but you could look around.
thank you.
Okay, I think that's it. Any closing comments from you guys, Brad? Are you all good? Good to go.
You guys brought one important closing comment. I think there's still time to mail your ballots back if you have not voted in the HEA election this year. They have to get them by May 5th, so you better do that soon.
As Aaron said, I stay politically neutral on everything I possibly can. So the person that knows the least about the annual meeting, other than what time I'm supposed to present, is me. I couldn't even told you the date until Carrie Ann said something, and it still went. I just try and stay out of all that. So thank you, Aaron, for that.
You should vote. You can vote. We keep the candidates safe and figure out who's
Thanks, folks, for your hospitality.
Perfect. Thanks, you guys. We really appreciate you coming over tonight and in person, and glad to see that we're able to do this in person. So really appreciate it. I'm not sure. Are you guys catching a flight back out then, or okay?
Another half hour.
Okay. Yeah. Anytime you can stick around or bug whenever. So you're good to go. Yeah. No problems.
Thank you.
Thank you guys for coming. All right. I'm G2. Up next will be Marianne Wilson.
Good evening, and thank you for the opportunity to meet with you. I'm here to ask for your help about a neighborhood eyesore, which I call a junkyard. I live at the end of Eagle Run Loop, a city street that really isn't a loop, but a dead end. To get home, I have to pass this site at the corner of Eagle Run Loop and Young Street. So many times a day, I am forced to see this junkyard. And every time it just hurts my soul. Have you heard the saying, one man's junk is another man's treasure? Well, my neighbor must think his yard is a pot of gold. I've shared several pictures with Heidi. And do you have those here tonight, Heidi?
I do not, but I can share them as needed.
Okay. Which I invite you to look at so you can see it for yourselves, or you could just drive by and take a look. Their property is quite small, and it used to belong to Pat and Vince Bates. Then their son inherited it and transferred it to the current occupants. I've watched their accumulation of treasures gradually grow from when they moved in 4+ years ago. And packed into the yard are 2 pickups that don't run, and I assume they're full of oil and other fluids, a large fishing boat, which has been in the same spot for years. A small skiff rests on the hillside of the public road where discarded soda cans frequently lie. There are huge coiled piles of old rope and an ancient dump truck, which is full of more stuff. When we got back, there was a wood splitter and a big pile of wood encroaching in the city road up to our house. Another big pile of wood is closer to the door of their house. They have a chicken coop and a run. There are also 2 more vehicles that sometimes run with the help of a big battery charger. There are numerous smaller items like pallets and buckets and totes and tires, but they're overshadowed by what I've described. When I had a summer B&B and had to give people walking directions, I told them to turn right at the house with the junk in the yard. So how's that for making a great first impression? My rental space was so cute and the view of Susan Lake and the mountain from their room was gorgeous, but they had to pass that junkyard to experience it. Is this the image of Seldovia that we want visitors to remember? So I first attempted to talk directly to my neighbor. He was unavailable and napping, so I spoke to his wife, and she said they just didn't have enough room in their yard for all their stuff. But she did say she'd ask her husband to move the wood splitter. I then asked the police for help, but since there isn't any city ordinance regarding household junk or junkyards, I have no legal recourse. The officer offered to talk to them also about moving the wood splitter out of the road. And it has been moved and some attempt has been made to clean the area up a little. But based on past experience, this is temporary. The accumulation of junk can be ugly. It can be an attractive hazard to children and a potential health risk due to hazardous wastes, and it reduces property values. Mike and I are getting up there in age, and I'm worried that an ambulance or fire truck would have a very difficult time even accessing our house. I don't know if you remember Sadie's lot, but I ended up buying that and cleaned up 30 years of junk because I couldn't stand looking at it. But I'm too old to do that this time around. So I hope that your definitions of junk versus treasure are more like mine. We live in such a beautiful place. It really pains me to see this happening. People are going to such efforts to beautify our city and present its best side to visitors. Our goal should be to control the accumulation of junk motor vehicles as well as other household debris. I'm asking the council to please consider an ordinance to oversee this kind of problem. There are a lot of options and degrees of restrictions available. I know that everyone has a need to store things, but it can be done in a neat and environmentally friendly way. I would ask that the ordinance require that a junkyard at minimum has a very high wooden fence to totally screen it from view of public roadways or neighboring properties. Thank you for your time and attention to this matter. Any questions?
Go ahead, Bobby.
Yeah.
Thank you, Marianne. I definitely feel your pain. You know, not that I want to single anyone out, but every time I drive by there or walk by there, I want to throw up.
Mhm.
So, and I know we have brought this to the surface once before, and nothing has ever been done because there are a lot of issues with folks and their fishing equipment. And we certainly don't want to infringe on that. But, you know, I agree with you. I think it's time to bring that up again and see what can be done or what can't be done. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, if I may?
Yep, go ahead.
Yes, Marianne, thank you for your presentation. You brought some good solutions forward also, along with your complaint of the situation. I agree. It is an eyesore right now. And I think the city's responsibility at this point in juncture is to make sure that the property owner does not have any of his belongings within any boundaries other than within his property line, first and foremost. And then, as Bobby said, we did look at this, the conversation has come up before, and I think it's something that we will do again. And I appreciate you coming in. I also appreciate the fact that you talked to the property owner to try to get resolution. I appreciate that. Thank you, Mary Ann. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Vivian.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mary Ann. Okay, we'll move on to item H, public present. Yep. On that matter, yes. Yep. Go ahead, Jan.
Jan,
You wanna
if
use
could
them?
use the microphone so that people on the TV can hear as well.
Right here? Okay. My name is Jan Wyland, and I live on the street below Mike and Mary Ann. When I come out of my driveway and drive down Block Street to get up to the main road, I drive by the back side of this property, and it isn't too much of a problem except for some of the stuff that's thrown over the bank. There's a skid thrown over. There's a piece of plywood thrown over, and they potentially have the chance to go down into the roadway. Then the city would have to come and clear it, or they would have to clear it. Mary Ann and Mike were out of town for the winter, and as I do with other people, I collect their mail. So they contacted me and said, could you do that? They sent me envelopes to send the mail on to them. So go up into our house and get the key. So I tried to go up the driveway or up the street. They had a visitor there with his car blocking the street. I couldn't even get up to their house. So I had to wait and go another day. And anyway, I just wanted to support Mike and Mary Ann that something needs to be done about all the junk and the trash. When we moved to Seldovia 35 years ago, the ordinance was that every residence had to have a designated parking area for their vehicles. And we complied by that. And I think most people around town do. But you can't have 2 or 3 vehicles in one that's supposed to be dedicated to one parking place. When the Bateses lived there, they had one parking area. They had one vehicle. So anyway, I would just like to see some kind of junk ordinance too, because it isn't only this place that has needed something like that. There are other areas that have come up in the past too that have needed some kind of intervention. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Jan. Okay, we'll go on to item H, public presentations for items not on the agenda. I see one.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yep, we have one hand, and Miss Laurel Hiltz.
Hi, Mr. Mayor. Can you hear me okay?
Yep, loud and clear, Laurel.
All right. Thank you so much. I'm trusting that our HEA guests have left the room.
Yep, they have left.
Okay, so I don't need to introduce myself. I think everybody knows who I am and who I work for. So just wanted to give a few updates in regards to activities and events that are taking place with Seldovia Village Tribe. We are planning a village area cleanup on Friday, May 7th. So that's the lands that are all outside of the city limits. And we will be putting out flyers and information for folks to let them know where they can put their bags and where they can get bags for collecting. And then we'll be doing a drawing where folks could potentially win a bear-proof trash cans. So it doesn't matter if you're living inside or outside of the city limits. If you want to come and help clean up that roadway, we'd be glad to have you, and you could be part of that potential of winning that trash can. So that's a great value, and it's certainly a great value to have everybody out cleaning up. And now that the snow is deciding to leave, can I hear a yahoo? I think it's, it's revealing some of that trash that's out there. So, and I know the city cleanup is coming, and I won't steal Rachel's thunder, I promise, Rachel. So, but so we've got that going on. And then the next day, Saturday, May 8th, we'll have a bike rodeo, our annual bike rodeo. And boy, it's that time of year when kids, they're just zooming all over the place. But obviously a lot more cars are in town coming in off of the ferry. And we're just all wanting to keep an eye out for the kids and help them be safe. So that bike rodeo is coming up. We will have a summer kickoff on on Friday, May 21st. And we're going to have heavy equipment out and do some hot dogs and fun stuff like we did 2 years ago. So we're really looking forward to that and just wanting to kick off our summer season with style. And as Dr. Zink encouraged, lots of outdoor events. And so you'll be seeing that happening with the tribe quite a bit. And then just a general announcement again about Seldovia Bay Ferry. Our official season starts on the 20th of May, but we're going to have, like we often do, an early run on Friday, May 14th and 15th. We'll be running those 2 days. So be looking for information on that. And just to follow up with Dr. Zink's talk with y'all, just a reminder that anyone is welcome to come to SBT Health and Wellness to sign up to be a patient and have access to that vaccine. And we make it available for any patients 18 and older. So those are the things that are going on with Seldovia Village Tribe. And then just a reminder that the Seldovia Chamber of Commerce is making plans for the human-powered fishing derby. And this year, Memorial Day is all the way at the 31st of May. So it's quite a ways down the line. But that weekend will be the human-powered fishing derby and a virtual awards or celebration. Thank you.
Thank you, Laurel. And I don't see any other hands up there. Yep, Aaron.
Sorry, they can't hear you without it. We can
Okay.
hear you, but they can't.
It's
All right. Just a quick update. You guys know that I applied for that technical assistant grant from the city, which we didn't get. I'm sorry about that, but there were a lot of good applicants. And some of the useful feedback they gave me, if we wanted to potentially do that again in another round, is basically if we had either or both a little bit more staff time to devote to that kind of thing. They were a little worried that, whether we could pull off our end, and also either a little bit of preliminary energy auditing or assessment that we could either do ourselves or find some funding for, so it wouldn't be starting something like that at completely ground zero. So that's just some of the feedback the folks who run that program gave on the application.
Thank you, Aaron. Appreciate the update on that. Anyone else from the public? Okay, we'll go ahead and move on to item I, committee and advisory reports. And it looks like we have Jan Yeager, EMS chief, discussing the roles and responsibility of the Seldovia medical director and the transitioning of the medical director.
Good evening. Can you hear me okay?
Yep, loud and clear, Jan.
Terrific. Yes, I wanted to talk to the council tonight a little bit about exactly what you said, the roles of the medical director and some recent developments. Just to give a little background, Seldovia Volunteer Fire EMS has been extremely lucky in that even though we've been in existence for about 40 years now, we have had that in that whole time only 2 medical directors. You all know Dr. Reynolds, who served as our medical director on a volunteer basis for over 30 years. And I know we know he retired once, and he actually retired twice when he initially decided to stop practicing and not continue his medical license. We were unable to find another medical director at that time. And so he actually renewed his license again and served as our medical director for 2 years after he'd finished practicing in the clinic. So we really want to recognize him for that. That was just absolutely invaluable. And then we got lucky again in that when Dr. Reynolds retired for the second time, Dr. William Cooper, who's been an ER physician in the Central Peninsula for a long time and been a medical director for Central Emergency Services and several other services, volunteered to, even though he was retiring from his professional medical director service, he remained a volunteer medical director for Seldovia EMS, as well as Seward, Cooper Landing, and some of the other services on the peninsula that he knew really couldn't afford to hire a medical director. And so he's served as our director for about 4, maybe 5 years now. And most medical directors make a fairly good living doing the medical director position. They're well compensated for their time. And so we have been just extremely lucky that we've gone 40 years and not had to pay a medical director. Dr. Cooper contacted me about 2 weeks ago to let me know, and I'm not sure his exact age, and I wouldn't try and guess, but he is well into his retirement, and he has decided he wants to retire for real. And so he let us know that it was time for us to find someone else to fill his position. He's not gone yet. He's still willing to carry us for at least a couple more months. And hopefully that'll be enough time for us to find somebody, but that has become quite urgent for us to do as a service. Basically, a medical director has several duties, and it's not that we can't function as an ambulance service without one, but we cannot provide any advanced care. The way the state of Alaska is set up, once you're an EMT1, you are recognized throughout the state as an EMT1, and you can function at that level throughout the state. But to do anything more advanced, EMT2s and 3s, as the current system is said, or paramedics, you have to work under somebody's medical license. So most of the medications that we push, starting IVs, doing cardiac monitoring, any cardiac interventions, anything like that, we cannot do without a medical director whose license we operate under. We also need a medical director in order to sign off on what we call our standing orders. And so those are our orders that basically are our guidance for how we treat a number of patient conditions. And so they're basically the medical director's instructions for what to do in any particular situation. So we call that offline medical direction. Medical directors also provide online medical support, which would be if we were to have a situation where we just needed a little more advice, a little more instruction. Our medical director is one of the phone calls that we can make to get that instruction. We also do have a backup for that. We can call South Peninsula Hospital Emergency Department and talk to the physician on duty, and we do that on a regular basis to get that instruction. But again, without having our own medical director, we will be severely limited in the care that we can provide. Another thing that medical directors do is they review our patient care reports with our crew. So every time that we do a medical run, whether it's a medical case or a trauma run, we write up a patient care report. Some of that gets passed off to the receiving facility. It travels with the patient so that it's part of their medical record, but then it also copy stays with us, and we write up more detail about exactly what happened during the call, what symptoms we saw, what signs the patient manifested, how we treated them, what the patient's response was, etc. And the medical director reviews all of those with us to see if we treated the patient appropriately, to see if there's something else that could have been done, to provide us more education about the patient's condition, new treatments, etc. It's both a measure and a learning opportunity. And then generally our medical directors also provide some other education for us as well. So it really is a critical role. And like I said, we've been very fortunate in the past that we have always been able to find someone to do that on a volunteer basis. And that's certainly something we're hoping for going forward, but until we find that individual, I think that it's wise to have contingencies in place. Obviously, one of the questions is insurance. Medical directors come with malpractice insurance. We reached out to AML-JIA last week to find out what the situation was for coverage under our existing city policy for liability. And as long as the person is in a volunteer capacity, they are covered by the city's insurance. So that was good news to have reinforced. If we do end up paying a medical director, however, then insurance becomes another matter. Dr. Cooper, because he served many services, he carried his own malpractice insurance specifically for the medical director role through the National Association of EMS Physicians. I think he told me it was about $5,500 a year that cost him. I tried to reach someone there today. I was not able to. And so I don't know if that was increased because he had several services that he was covering. I don't know. I'm going to try and find some more information about that. I've also reached out to Dr. Michael Levy, who is the medical director for the municipality of Anchorage. He also covers central emergency services and a good portion of the Kenai Peninsula. I had a conversation with him this afternoon to let him know that we're looking, see if he might be able to offer something, or if he may know someone who might. But again, this is kind of a developing situation, and just because of the potential that there may need to be some compensation in order to retain a medical director, we felt that this was important for the city council to know that the situation was going on. So because time is limited, I know you've got a long agenda tonight, I will end it there, but I'm happy to take questions.
Any questions from council? I know I've got one quick one, Jan. Do they have to be, does the medical director have to be licensed in the state of Alaska, or can you get someone from outside? How does that work?
That is a fabulous question. Yes, according to state law, they do need to be licensed in the state of Alaska. My understanding is that if we had a situation such as, maybe a physician who had retired up here, who practiced in another state and didn't have an Alaska license, that it was, I asked both Dr. Cooper and Dr. Reynolds about this, and they felt that it wouldn't be terribly difficult for that person to get an Alaska state license. I think that's about $500, and it's good for 2 to 3 years. The only other requirement besides the state of Alaska license is that they be certified in advanced cardiac life support. That's a training that all of our advanced EMTs use, and so that's fairly straightforward to do as well. And I understand the state of Alaska is requiring a medical director's course. That's a new development, but that is something that is available online. It doesn't require any traveling or anything. I'm not sure what the hour commitment is, however.
Okay, excellent. No, I appreciate that. Yeah, I had a couple ideas and names come to mind, but I'll follow up more on that. And then, what was the other question? Yeah, in terms of your recruiting or advertising efforts, I know it's just at the initial stages of this, but is there somewhere that we can advertise to get the word out? I mean, I know AML-JIA might be a pretty good avenue, but are there other places to advertise for a free medical director?
I'm not sure. Honestly, that's one of the reasons that I reached out to Dr. Levy, because I know that he's pretty well connected to medical directors throughout the state. And so even if he's not able to serve us, he may have some good ideas for someone who may be able to. Because Dr. Cooper served several volunteer services throughout the peninsula, we're not the only ones out there looking right now. So that does provide a little bit more of a challenge. But
okay, no, I appreciate the update on that. Okay, no hands up. Any
Mr. Mayor?
questions from the public? Yep. Bobby, did you have a
Is
question?
it- Yeah, is it too late for me?
Nope, go ahead.
Okay. Hey, Jan,
Mhm.
so I've been out of the medical field a while, obviously, and I know things are changing. And I can't remember, does the medical director have to be an MD?
Yes.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, any other
Mr.
questions
Mayor.
for Jan? Yep, go ahead, Harmony.
Hey, Jan, I didn't have a question. I just want to say thank you on behalf of our community and the village area for all the legwork that you're doing. I know that you have a big job at your 9 to 5, and for you to be putting so much legwork in all the time on top of the runs and all the other things associated with that. Thank you so much for all the volunteer time that you do, Jan. You are very appreciated.
Well, I thank you, Harmony, and I appreciate there's many volunteers, both listening and not listening tonight, and Seldovia definitely runs on volunteers, and it's a great community because of that.
Copy that, but we all do well for having such a great support and such a great leader. There's a lot of people, as you said, listening and not, who make this department and this community run. And thank you to all of them. I appreciate everybody who does that, but truly, you do a lot and you are appreciated. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Harmony. Jan, thank you for giving us the update on that this evening. We appreciate your efforts, and we'll look forward to an update hopefully here in the near future. So thanks for your time tonight. Okay, we'll go ahead and move on to item J1, Action Memorandum 21-11, approving the certification of the FY20 audit as presented by Altman Rogers and Company, certified public accountants. This will be found on page 25 of your packet. And it looks like Andy is on the line. And we'll go ahead and start off with presentation by staff.
Thank you, Mayor. Every year, the city finances are audited by a third party, and it's not for our current fiscal year, but for the fiscal year that we just got out of. And so I really appreciate Andy, and I'm sorry, Andy, if I say your last name incorrectly, Bergine, for attending and giving council some insights on the FY20 audit. I kind of gave Andy a few perspectives that I would love to get our auditors discussing with council, but it's kind of open to you, Andy, on what trends or observations you have for Seldovia City Council to consider.
Okay, great. So my name is Andy. I am an auditor with Altman Rogers and Company. I have been with Altman and Rogers for approaching 6 years, and I've been a part of the Seldovia audit for the last 2. So I'm here to present the FY20 audit report to you today, and thank you for allowing me to come speak with you. So does everybody have a copy of the letter to the governing board?
Yes, we do. It's in our packet.
Okay, so this letter is strictly for management and the council, and it's mostly boilerplate. However, there's 2 items in here that I feel are significant enough to touch base on. The first is on page 1, and that's in reference to the accounting estimates. And so not every number in the financial statements is as concrete as, say, cash. There are some estimates that management makes that are taken into account. 2 of these are accounts receivable and the allowance for doubtful accounts. And another one would be the useful lives of assets. So we reviewed these estimates and we determined them reasonable and similar or in line with standards or other cities in the state. The second item that I'd like to touch base on is on page 2, the corrected and uncorrected misstatements. That's a list of the corrected misstatements that we identified during the course of our audit. The most significant being the last one, the prior period adjustment. We'll talk about that more towards the end of my presentation. But that prior period adjustment is basically from the transition from Cassell to QuickBooks. Cassell is not really a accounting software designed for a city such as Seldovia. It takes a lot of training and takes a lot bigger staff than Seldovia has to run it adequately. And so when Cassell was being used as the accounting software, I don't believe the cash receipts that were coming in were properly getting credited to the accounts receivable, which resulted in the misstatement of 157K, which we had to run through with a prior period adjustment in FY20. So those are the two items that are most significant in the letter to the governing board. We can now move on to the actual financial statements. And on page 1 is the opinion, and the first item, or the second item in the opinion, addresses management's responsibility. Essentially, that while we did assist with the drafting of the financial statements, they were derived from the city's QuickBooks accounting software, and they remain the property of the city at the end of the day. The next item is the auditor's responsibility. And this says that we conducted our audit in accordance with generally accepted auditing practices and principles, as well as the government auditing standards. It addresses some of the steps that we go through during the course of our audit. We look at samples of transactions for different types of transactions. We look at cash disbursements, payroll, cash receipts. We look at billings. We look at credit cards. We also look at material transactions. Materiality was $5,000. So every transaction over that $5,000 threshold we examined. We also tied out material balance sheet accounts substantively. We looked at, cash, accounts receivable, accounts payable, capital assets, all of the standard or typical balance sheet accounts that you're familiar with. So moving on to page 2 is the opinion. And in our opinion, the financial statements referred to above present fairly in all material respects the respective financial position of the governmental activities, each major fund, and the aggregate remaining fund information for the city of Seldovia, Alaska, as of June 30th, 2020. So this is an unmodified opinion. And of the 4 opinions we are allowed to provide as auditors, this is the best. So that's good. The remainder of the opinion through page 3 is all pretty boilerplate. Moving on to page 4, we get into the actual financial statements of the city, the profit and loss, the balance sheet, the footnotes, all of the supplementary information, all the budget to actual comparisons. And we can look at those more in detail in a minute. However, I would like to jump towards the end on page 59. Let's see. 59 is the report on internal control over financial reporting and on compliance. So this is the government auditing standards opinion. And the main purpose of this letter is to basically disclose the results of our testing of internal controls. So previously in the opinion, when I was going over the opinion, I mentioned that we sampled all the different types of transactions. So we looked at 40 cash disbursements, 40 payroll transactions, 40 billing transactions, 25 cash receipts, and 2 credit card statements in their entirety. And when we looked at these, we had a couple discrepancies, a couple errors, and those are described in this opinion, in this governmental auditing standards opinion. At the bottom, you can see that we determined there would be 2 material weaknesses, and at the top of the following page, 3 significant deficiencies. And significant deficiency can be thought of, well, internal controls can be thought of as preventative, detective, and corrective. And so in our testing, if we find a transaction that management failed to prevent, detect, or correct, we have to assess a finding or a significant deficiency. So those findings that I just went over are a result of the testing that we did during our audit. All right, that being said, we can move on to the next page, 61. And this is the schedule of findings and responses. And this can be viewed as kind of the report card, I guess. It starts off by saying that the city received an unmodified opinion. There's no going concern. And then it also discloses that there were material weaknesses and significant deficiencies identified. And then it goes on to disclose those in greater detail. So the first finding is over payroll. And during our testing, we, I think, encountered one transaction which was paid incorrectly. The employee, I think, received 2 hours of pay in addition of what he actually worked. And so it also notes that it was a repeat finding from 2019. So the way that this can best be addressed and not repeated again is just through a second review. I know Jan reviews everything the first time. However, it'd be a good idea if there were a second set of eyes after she kind of reviewed everything and kind of input it into QuickBooks. On the next page is the second finding that we have assessed, and this is over credit cards. So credit cards is a really high risk area, it's inherently risky. There's been a lot of fraud. I'm sure a lot of people in the council meeting tonight have, had a fraudulent charge on their credit card. I know I have. That's pretty easily resolved. However, when it's with a city, it can compound itself just because the amount of funds that perhaps the city has or the amount of expenditures that could be incurred. So the credit cards ideally should go through the same internal controls that cash disbursements go through. Everything should be properly approved prior to the purchase being made. The next finding was the material weakness assessed over the financial closing. And this, again, was a repeat finding. And I think this finding this year was not really avoidable with the turnover, perhaps. I know that it's difficult to get everything reconciled when there's a lot of turnover in staff. So I don't think this should be a problem again, as long as, the main accounts, cash and whatnot, are reconciled throughout the year. And then the beginning balances agree with the audited financial statements that you'll see in front of you. The next finding is a significant deficiency over cash disbursements. And I believe there was just one transaction which did not appear to be supported or authorized. I'm looking at it now, and it doesn't necessarily appear to be fraudulent or unallowed. It just wasn't properly approved, so we could not, there was no second approval, which is and internal control that the city has. The last finding is a material weakness, the prior period adjustment that I talked about during the letter to the governing board. And this again is kind of unavoidable when the city got involved with Cassell. They kind of took on more than they could handle themselves. They weren't getting adequate help from the IT department at Cassell. So when we looked at accounts receivable at the end of FY20, we determined that it was off by that $157,000. And we had to post an entry for that amount to correct the beginning balance. Those were the 5 findings that we determined for FY20. The next page goes over the prior year findings, whether or not it was resolved, whether or not it was repeated. And then lastly, you'll see the corrective action plan, which I don't believe is completed yet, but management will complete that with their plans on how they're going to address it going forward. All right, so now moving back to the actual financial statements, jumping back to page 4, page 5, we can see that the statement of net position, we can see that the city had $962,000 of cash at 6/30/20. However, this amount is not, it's a little misleading. Approximately almost 600,000 of that is restricted for purposes of the permanent fund, leaving about close to 400,000 of actual cash on hand. That being said, that's not really truly available to be spent because there's a large amount of deferred or unearned revenue if you look towards the liabilities. So a significant portion of that is earmarked for specific expenditures. So that being said, I would recommend the city kind of works to build up their reserves. When we audit, we're not really looking at the financial, what do I want to say? The financial standing of the city, unless it's determined that there's a going concern. However, it's a good idea to have a significant amount of reserves just on hand for repairs and maintenance. Are there any questions so far?
Mr. Mayor, if I may.
Yep, go ahead, Vivian.
Yeah, I'm looking at this. I'm looking at this on my iPhone, so it's a little bit small. But could you elaborate on this huge number of $157,000 and what that actually means to the audit and means to the city of Seldovia? It's a scary number, but I don't really understand it. But could you break it down to what it really means to the city from your position as an auditor and to the city, please?
Yeah, you're talking about the $157,000 material misstatement, the prior period adjustment, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so yeah, during FY, I guess it would be 19, the cash receipts that were coming in were not being properly credited to the accounts receivable balance. So when a cash receipt comes in, you obviously decrease, you increase cash and you decrease the accounts receivable. And it looks like the cash receipts coming in were not properly decreasing the accounts receivable balance. So at the end of FY19, that balance was inflated by 157K. That was just simply due to the staff not being trained in the accounting software. So during FY20, we looked at the accounts receivable balance and we said, wow, this is clearly incorrect. There's no way it can be this high. So we looked at subsequent cash receipts. We looked at all the cash receipts coming in within like the first 3 months of the year. And we determined that 157K was received, but it's still recorded on the books. So we had to reduce that accounts receivable balance as of 6/30/20 and offset the fund balance, or the beginning number, which is fund balance. So what I'm trying to say is it was an error made in FY19. However, we had to run it through FY20 with a prior period adjustment. Does that make a little more sense?
Yeah, it makes it a little bit more sense. And in the long run for the city of Seldovia, looking forward in its audits, is that still going to keep coming up and following us?
No. So
Okay.
that is a good question. No, that the cash receipts and accounts receivable issue was fixed with that entry at 6/30/20. I believe Jan's been entering everything correctly since then, so there shouldn't be any large discrepancy like this again. No.
Okay, thank you.
Mayor, if I may.
Yep, go ahead, Rachel.
So Andy, just to clarify too, it was to avoid the city basically double counting revenue.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, so just to follow up on that, so yeah, I mean, from what the city manager was saying, I mean, there was no fraud or anything like that. The money was received. It was obviously, it had to get credit. If it was deposited, it had to get credited somewhere. It just that our AR was never reduced. So at the end of the year, it looked like we had another 157,000 that was still owed to the city out there.
Right. And yeah, so yeah, it was saying that the numbers at FY19 were incorrect, which we corrected with that entry in FY20.
Yep. Okay. Appreciate that. Any other questions before he moves on? Yep, Rachel, another follow-up.
So Andy, I'm very glad that you brought up the need for the city to look into building up its reserves. That's actually a conversation that I'm hoping to have with council starting this fall. And something that I wanted to touch on with you is the city of Seldovia, for a few budget documents now, has been calling out something called major maintenance and repair funds. And yet in your audit documents, there's never an audit of an actual fund called the major maintenance and repair funds. And so my understanding of that is not money that's actual cash existing in an account. It's just the city earmarking the fund balance of those various special revenue funds in the general fund. And so I just wanted to get that conversation started with you, because I think the impression that the city has had is that that is tangible money, cash money that we have on hand for emergencies or capital outlays, when in fact it's not money at all, but just something that we've been earmarking in the various funds.
Correct. So let me see. So if you turn to page 6, page 6 has your balance sheet by major fund. And so I believe this is what you're talking about, is the fund balance at the bottom line there. You can see the general fund has a fund balance of 153K. However, that is not available to be spent because it's all committed to the permanent fund. There's really no unassigned or available fund balance in the general fund, which is, the general fund is, you're probably aware of this, but the main pot of funds, unless it's specifically designated elsewhere, like the boat harbor or the water fund. So I think that's what you're talking about. And that would be key, is to build up the unassigned fund balance in the general fund, because that is essentially unrestricted funds. You can use that for whatever the council determines. And that is built up through an excess of revenues over expenses. So that just comes down to budgeting and then staying in line with those budgets. So if you look at the other funds, you can see the boat harbor has a fund balance deficit, and there's no unassigned fund balance. I think this is what Rachel was saying, is that there's no unearmarked funds that are kind of just sitting there. Everything is already assigned or committed.
Mayor.
Yep, go ahead.
And so just to clarify that too, Andy, in Seldovia City Code, there's a section that discusses major maintenance and repair funds where the council could be allocating money to essentially set up a reserve, but we haven't been doing that. What instead we've been doing is just saying that out of the unrestricted fund balance, we're going to earmark a certain amount of that for various needs. And technically that's not cash that we have on hand to be able to use for anything. So I just, I'm really glad we're having this conversation, because I think there's been the impression that we have this emergency money sitting aside when really we do not have that.
You still with us, Andy, or is he froze?
Yeah, I agree with everything that was just said. Yeah, there is no real reserves that the city has at this point. Everything, I think everything has pretty much been assigned or committed. There's no unassigned fund balance, right?
Okay, any other questions before he moves to the next part? Okay, go ahead, Andy.
Okay, so moving on, we can look at I guess the next area or the next page I'd like to jump to is the general fund budget to actual, which is after the footnotes on page, begins on page 42. And this is, I believe, kind of the most important area where the city can start tightening up its budget perhaps and building up that unassigned fund balance. And then, of course, designating some of that money for repairs, for future repairs and maintenance. You can see that the revenues on page 42, you're bringing in more than you think you are in revenues, which is always good. However, with the expenses, there's a couple areas which, when you're reviewing the budget for FY21, maybe just double check. On page 43, you can see, of course, pretty big excess of expenditures in regards to the budget amount when it comes to administration. The top line item there, salaries and wages, almost $52,000 was budgeted for salaries and wages. I'm sorry, $52,000 was spent on salaries and wages in administration, and only about $14,000 was budgeted. So we can drill down into that number and see exactly who's getting coded there, but that would be one area where we could kind of look at to tighten up the budget. Another area would be public works on page 45. The top two line items, salaries, wages, and employee benefits, accounts for almost half of the over appropriated or under appropriated amount. There's a deficit of $85,000 in public works. Overall in the general fund, there was at the end of the day, at the end of FY20, an excess of revenues over expenditures of $15,509. So that's actually really good that it wasn't overexpended in total. However, for future years, if we can just kind of work on increasing that number, I mean, that's all we really want to do, and then build up that unassigned fund balance. Continuing on through the financial statements, we've got budget to actuals for all of these special revenue funds, the boat, harbor, the water, which are the other two major funds this year. It looks like both of these were operating in the black at a were $60,000 in excess of revenues over expenditures. So that's obviously good there. And yeah, the remainder of the financial statements just goes into more detail by fund. You can see exactly the assets and liabilities, the revenues and expenses by each special revenue fund. You can see that on page 50, that although you do have a significant amount of cash in the bank, some of that is earmarked for these special revenue funds. Obviously, $125,000 of that is earmarked for the CARES Act, things that must be specifically related towards Corona. Yeah, are there any other specific questions you'd like to go over?
Yeah, I have one. Can we go back to page 47 real quick?
Yeah,
On
sure thing.
let's see, this is on the Harbor Fund here. And so at the bottom of that, where we've got, okay, so our overall variance, excess of revenues over expenditures. So we had 200 in, let's see, original and final budgeted amounts was 200. Let's see, expenditures, 200 for revenue, 200 for expenditures, 236 in revenue was actual, expenditures were 176. The two variances came up to a total of 60,000, 60,000 in the black. And so that is what took our starting balance, our fund balance. At the beginning of the year, we were in the hole 187 grand. So the ending fund balance as of for fiscal year 20 was $127,000. So I noticed there's so that one we're able to start climbing out. So can you explain to me a little bit more about the fund balances at the end of each year? Just so how I'm fully aware how that works.
Right. Yeah. I think you've got it. It's just basically retained earnings for what can be thought of as retained earnings for a for-profit company or equity. It's just exactly like you said, the excess of revenues over expenditures. I'd have to look back into prior years and see what caused that major fund deficit that we're looking at to start with, that negative 187K. But it looks like you guys are on the right track in Boat Harbor and the Boat Harbor Special Revenue Fund. It's ideal that at the minimum your revenues coming in offset your expenses, which is exactly what you guys are budgeting for. And then you're obviously coming in over budget on the revenues, under budget on the expenditures, giving an excess of revenues over expenditures, that net 60,179K number. But yeah, fund balance is just the excess of revenues over expenditures, the retained earnings of the fund.
Okay. Any other questions, comments?
Did that answer your question adequately?
Yep. It sure did. I'm just trying to see how that relates to actual cash. That's in terms of when you have to start, if you're carrying a negative fund balance, how you continue to, how that impacts the cash on hand, I guess.
Okay. So yeah, I can talk about that a little bit more. So yeah, let's see, if you compare that schedule there to the front schedule, the combining schedules, you can see that they all get lumped in together for your total governmental funds. And the one negative fund balance for the Boat Harbor Special Revenue Fund, the negative 127K, it's offset enough by the aggregate fund information, the general fund, all of the other non-major special revenue funds. So it doesn't really show up as a huge red flag on the combining schedule. It definitely doesn't show up as a red flag on the government-wide financial statements, which is the A1 and the B1, because the A1 and the B1 take into account the city's capital assets, which obviously is a very significant number when compared to the negative 127K that is in the boat harbor. When you take into account all the capital assets, all the cash of the entire entity, it just kind of disappears into the entire city. But it is concerning. It would be more concerning if there was a constant deficit that was getting ran. The excess of expenditures in the current year is a good sign for that, I'd say.
Mr. Mayor.
Looks like it might have gotten frozen.
Yeah, it does look like that. Kind of just waiting to see Heidi move again. Vivian, are you there?
I am. Can you hear me?
I can.
There they
So
go.
it's-
She's going to reboot.
Okay. Okay.
Maybe.
I will wait. Heidi, are you there? No, she's not there. Okay.
I'm going to try to text her and see what's up.
Thank you.
There, maybe they're coming up. There we go. Maybe they're coming.
Yeah.
There we go.
Can you hear us now? It seems like we're having some internet difficulties.
Yep, can hear you now.
Okay, sorry about that. I think our internet went down temporarily, but we are back up.
All right, sorry about that. Andy, can you hear us?
Yep, I can hear you guys.
Okay, sorry, you started going and then you froze and it all went south from there.
Okay. Well, I was just saying that the negative fund balance in the one boat harbor special revenue fund is rolled up into the city as a whole, and so it kind of gets buried. And when it gets rolled up into the government-wide financial statements, it pretty much disappears because it's offset by these millions of dollars of capital assets that the city has, which kind of hides the negative fund balance there.
Okay, yeah, appreciate that explanation.
Mayor, may I add to that?
Yep, go ahead.
So Andy, also, if we were to remove the capital assets that the city has on hand and just look at the fund balances of all the special revenue funds and the general fund, You could also say that the harbor is being subsidized by all the other funds.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And I think I did say that, but I must have got cut off. Yeah. If you look at page 8, which is the combining statement of balance sheets for all the funds, and it excludes the capital assets. This is a very good summary sheet because it shows the major funds, the general fund, the boat harbor, and the water, and the harbor improvements, which are all considered major funds. And you can see that the boat harbor fund deficit is significant when you just look at this statement, which is a good one to look at. And yeah, it is getting kind of buried or subsidized or hidden in the other fund balances.
Okay, so the good thing though is it looks like in FY20 we knocked 60 grand out of that, and then I don't know how we're doing yet in 21, but we'll see how that goes. So all right, that's good news. Any other questions based on page 8 there, what we're all looking at? Looking at everything in the aggregate.
Right, and I think I said page 8, but actually it's page 6, which is the combining balance sheet, and there you can see that the majority of cash is in, well, all cash is really in the general fund. However, a lot of it is allocated toward the other funds with the unearned revenue kind of earmarked there. But yeah, you can see the same thing. The fund balance is getting buried or subsidized or hidden in the remaining major funds and other funds.
Okay, what's next? You want to keep moving forward?
So I actually don't have anything more to present. If there are any questions about any given number, I can tell you what's in that number. However, I don't think it'd be very beneficial to go page by page, column by column. If there's any specific questions on what makes up a number or anything like that, you can email me or email the city manager, Heidi, or Rachel or Jan, and they can assist you with your budget questions, or reach out to me and I can dig into our audit work papers and see what makes up a number or what you're looking for.
I just, did you have another question, Rachel? Yep. No, I guess it's kind of like what Vivian was saying too. You look at this audit, there's 75 pages here. I guess for me, it's just the bottom line of, FY20. It's hard when you start figuring in all the depreciation and everything and all of the capital assets and stuff, is to figure out on a cash basis, revenue versus expenses overall, how stable we were for the bottom line number, looking at trend. I want to know if trends, are we on the right track? Are we on the wrong track here? Is what I'm looking for.
Okay. Yeah, sure. So when you're looking at the numbers that you're referencing, you want to stay away from the A1 and the B1, page A1 and B1, which is the first two financial statements, page 4 and 5. Stay clear of those because those take into account the fixed assets, the capital assets. And if you're just looking at the revenues and expenses, look at the fund financial statements, the C1 and the D1. You can see that I think you guys are on the right track, or you're pointed in the right direction. Obviously, in FY20, you operated at a surplus in the general fund. There were a couple areas which were overexpended. However, in total, the general fund operated at a surplus of $15,509. When you look at all of the funds together on the D1 page 8, you can see that there was an excess of almost $200,000. when you look at the general fund and all the special revenue funds and capital project funds. So the surplus of $200,000 is a very good starting point for FY20. I don't have, well, I do have FY19 on hand. I can take a look and see what that looked like. But also take into account FY19 is kind of skewed because of that $157K that we discussed the prior period adjustment for. So in FY19, it looks like there was, yeah, we can't look at FY19 there just because of that, what I just mentioned. FY19 is not really comparable. For FY20, I would say, yeah, you guys are on the right track. You're operating a surplus. I would just continue to mainly focus on budgeting. Obviously, the state is in a tight spot right now with everything that's going on. A lot of clients that we see are losing money, losing grants, donations are down, contributions are down. So really just budgeting, and also with regards to internal controls, making sure that everything is properly reviewed, approved. Time cards agree to the time sheets and agree to what the employees are getting paid. I think focusing on those two areas, the internal controls aspect and then the budgeting, would probably be most important going here on out.
Okay. Did you have one follow-up, Rachel?
Andy, thank you so much. I just had one more thing that I wanted to shed some light on, which is the reference to the Harbor Improvement Capital Fund. I know that I think a similar situation to what you discussed happened in FY19 with an over-reporting of fund balance is something that happened with the Jackaloff dock and how we failed to remove that revenue off of the books. So it looked as though we had $356,000 from Jackaloff when that had already been spent. And so management made the decision to depreciate, or to quote unquote spend 50,000 off of that on the books, but technically that money had already been absolved.
Right. So I'm in FY20, there is no activity in the Harbor Improvements Capital Project Fund. If we look back into FY19, I'm not seeing that there was any revenues or expenses in the Harbor Improvements Capital Project Funds in FY19 either.
I'm trying to find the page in the audit that discusses that fund, but as the city moves towards having discussions on how to maintain Jackaloff Dock, we received funding from the state initially when we acquired the dock, and all of that money, I believe, had been spent, but we hadn't properly credited that on the books. And so I just wanted to bring that, in case anyone saw that in the audit, discuss that with you as well.
And was that in the current year, in FY20?
Yes, I believe the plan was to reduce it by $50,000 a year, and maybe we've already expended it all, but technically didn't spend anything in the past few fiscal years. But that was just something else I wanted to bring up.
Okay, I think that is sounding familiar now.
And of course, because I brought it up now, I can't find it, but
There's only 75 pages to choose from. So-
well, we could save that discussion for another day, since I did bring it up, but we can save that for another day.
Okay, I'm looking at, I think I see what you're talking about now. In the state of Alaska gave almost $400,000 for dock maintenance. It looks like that was all spent. However, yes, we have been, and we are amortizing it at $50,000 a year. But yeah, the funds were received back in 2008. And it looks like they were all spent. However, right, we're just amortizing that over the course of kind of treating it like a fixed asset or a capital asset, I think.
Right, so if, I found it on page 20 of the audit. You'll see Harbor Improvements Capital Project Fund, which could lead somebody to think that we had $237,000 for Jackaloff dock maintenance, but technically we do not. That money does not exist. It's already been spent.
Correct. So what I believe happened there, let me double check and see if I can. So yeah, that's entirely correct. There are no available funds in that Harbor Improvements Capital Project Fund. The entire amount, that $236,893K, that has already all been spent. We're just amortizing it over the course of the life, or the remaining life of the, I'm not sure how what the time span, if it's the life of the project or the grant or the docs, but we're amortizing that $50,000 over the remaining life. And correct, there's no available funds within that special revenue fund or that capital project fund.
Thank you.
Okay, any final questions for Andy before we go to the public?
Mr. Mayor,
Yep, go ahead, Harmony.
I see a couple of spots in a couple different pages where they're where you're bringing up wages, employee wages, and questions about payroll, and I'm just wondering what those are about.
Yep, sure. What pages are you looking at?
I think I was looking at, sorry, it's bounced around with what you guys are talking about. So I'm looking at 64, 60 and 60. Yeah, so 64 is one mentioned somewhere else too. So it looks like there's was an approval over employee timesheets. Was that just when there was like a transitional period with our city managers, or?
So I believe, so on page 61, we have a significant deficiency for FY20 with regards to internal controls over payroll. And this was just because there was a timesheet that was incorrectly calculated. I think the employee worked only the employee worked 96 hours during this pay period, but he was paid for 98. So when we're testing the internal controls, we take a sample of payroll transactions. We trace them throughout the entire system. We start with the employee's time card, and then we look at their pay stub to make sure that what they were paid agrees to what they actually earned, what they are recording on their timesheet. And then we trace that amount, those numbers, into the system to make sure everything recorded in the QuickBooks, which are the numbers in the financial statements, agree with the source documentation. So that finding for 2020 is because the employee was overpaid. He was paid more hours than he worked. Then on page 64, we had a same, not the same, but we had a problem and an issue with the internal controls over payroll during the FY19 audit. Slightly different area, but it's considered a repeat finding because it's in the same payroll system. The finding for FY19 was related to the rates that employees were getting paid did not quite agree with their authorized rate that they should have been getting paid. It looks like the finding for FY19, which is on page 64, that's the schedule of prior year findings. That might have been during that transition period because it says there was no approval over employee timesheets for the month of October. So I'm not sure if there was no finance director or finance manager or city manager at that time, but it looks like for the entire month of October, nothing was getting approved like it should have been. So those findings are as a result of the sampling that we do. We look at the population for payroll, all the checks that are cut to all the employees throughout the fiscal year. We sample them and test them in the manner I just described. We look at the timesheets, the time cards, and the coding and making sure they're all properly reviewed, approved, and everything agrees with each other. So there's no fraud here that we're reporting on, just a failure in internal controls, that there is a chance that the financial statements, there might be errors, not material, but errors because the internal controls of the city did not either prevent this error from happening, prevent it, detect it, or correct it. Had the city prevented it and fixed it and found it prior to us getting there, we would have said the internal controls are functioning fine. There was an error, but the city caught it. The errors that we're reporting on were not addressed prior to the auditors showing up, so they resulted in findings. Does that help?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for answering my question.
Mm-hmm.
And
Did you have a follow-up?
yeah, through the mayor, Councilmember Payton, just to clarify too, that's October 2019. So there wasn't a city manager transition then, I don't believe.
Well, that would have been October 2018 for the FY19 finding.
Right. Yeah. So I was just, as I was scrolling through, I saw that a couple different times at a couple different pages, and I was just wondering what that was, and you answered my question. So thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? And do we have any hands up from the public at all? I'm not seeing any. Okay, I think, Andy, unless there's any other comments, questions, Andy, thanks for your time this evening. We appreciate you giving us the info that we're looking for, answering questions, and thanks for the report.
Yeah, thank you. If there's any additional questions that the council has, please have Rachel or Heidi or Jan reach out to me, and I can do whatever I can to help out.
Perfect. Thank you. We're really appreciate it.
Yep. Thank you. Have a good night.
Okay, you too. Appreciate it. All right. Okay. That's going to bring us back to final action disposition. And what we have before us is action memorandum 21-11, looking to approve the certification of the FY20 audit presented by Altman Rogers. And is there any further discussion before we look for a vote or a motion? Okay, then I'll look for a motion to approve memorandum 21-11.
Mr. Mayor, I'll make a motion to approve action memorandum 21-11.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion by Rojas to approve or accept action memorandum 21-11, second by Colberg. All those in favor, Sweat,
Aye.
Colberg,
Aye.
Morrison,
Aye.
Rojas,
Aye.
Peyton.
Aye.
Motion carries 5-0 to accept action or approve action memorandum 21-11. Is everyone okay? Does anyone need a break for a few minutes? Or are we good to knock a couple more of these out?
Good to go.
All right, let's get a couple of these ones done and then we can take a quick break. Item J2, we got a long agenda tonight. Item J2, ordinance 21-09, an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Seldovia, Alaska, amending section 2.04.070 meetings, order of business. This is found on page 103 of your packet. And presentation by staff.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So if you turn to, and it's actually, I believe, I have it, so, see, I'm looking ahead of myself.
Yep.
Sorry, I'm just grabbing it here. I thought I had the right one in my hands, but I did not. Yes, so page 103 here. This is an ordinance that was introduced at the last meeting to amend the order of business, which is our agenda, in code to allow for staff reports to become earlier on in the meeting. And we'll also remove payment approval report because QuickBooks does not allow us to do that same kind of reporting that Cassell did. That's why we haven't been presenting any, is we just don't have that same payment approval report that QuickBooks did for us very nicely. But we still have that internal control where the council members are our check signers and come in and verify what we're purchasing. So that's still being taken care of, but there won't be a nice report provided anymore. It also includes just a section in here because we've had issues with just remembering or deciding what the protocol will be for the seating of newly elected members. So that would be the oath that they would take. So I just put that in there as F. That won't regularly be on the agenda. So those items will actually all move up one. Mayoral proclamations would be F normally, but in the case where a new council member is being seated, that F for newly elected members will show up. And city manager's report will still remain at the end because it's a little longer sometimes than she is here, but you'll see that administration reports is just there under K. I do want to mention that the reason this is done this way is through research and talking to other municipal clerks and looking at Alaska statutes. It's good practice for the council to approve the order of business, and this can be done in a variety of ways. I've seen it done through either a resolution that is regularly updated, or even through a resolution approving a handbook, like a council handbook, which is a goal that I would love to accomplish someday in the future. But because it was already an ordinance form, we chose to still keep it in ordinance form and just make the amendment. But in the future, there is the possibility that if it works best for the council or there will be more regular changes, it'd be quicker to do in a one reading resolution form, and it could be removed from the ordinance and done differently. This just seemed to simplify the process this time.
That it?
That's it.
Okay, thank you. Okay, that'll bring us to council discussion on ordinance 21-09. Any questions or comments on 21-09?
Comment.
Yep,
Just
Bobby?
Thanks, Heidi, for cleaning this up. If you, like you said, you've checked with other places and we're supposed to be doing it a certain way, then that's the way we should do it. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions, comments? Okay, we'll move to the public. Any hands up for questions or comments on ordinance 21-09? Okay, looks like no hands are up on that. That'll bring it back to council for final action.
Mr. Mayor, if you're looking for a motion, Mr. Mayor, I'll put in a motion that we adopt ordinance 21-09.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Rojas to approve ordinance 21-09, second by Colberg. All those in favor, Sweat,
Aye.
Colberg,
Aye.
Morrison,
Aye.
Rojas,
Aye.
Peyton.
Aye.
Okay, motion is approved 5-0 to pass ordinance 21-09. Take us to item J3, ordinance 21-10, an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Soldovia, Alaska, amending chapter 2.32 elections. That's found on page 106. And staff presentation, please.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Okay, we're turning to 106. This is a little bit of a bigger change, cleanup of the code for elections. We've done a few small spot cleanups over the last couple of years, but elections does change. And part of what we've been working on is aligning more with the municipalities and the boroughs, or in the borough for the Kenai Peninsula. There's been a lot of support there, and the clerks have been meeting together regularly, supporting each other through that process. I know that the borough had an election stakeholder group over the last couple of years. A council member, Colberg, was able to be a part of, and council member Rojas was an alternate, as well as myself as a expert for the city of Soldovia on elections. And some recommendations came out of that. And what's ending up happening now is that the borough is just last week approved the purchase of all new equipment. So that'll be coming, and there'll be some training coming up this summer. And part of that is the opportunity for the city to be able to use that equipment in the city elections as well, in order to be able to offer the best ADA access and be compliant for ADA needs. And so this came about in part of that process in looking at our election code. There were definitely items in here that were a little bit overkill on just what process needed to be followed, and then some that didn't explain enough. And if you go to, I wrote a nice memo that just kind of clarified those changes, and that is going to be on starting page 122. And that memorandum states that the elections would be amended to clearly define that the city clerk is responsible for administering the elections, amending the notice of election procedures, providing clarification regarding candidacy qualifications, declaration of candidacy, determination of eligibility, voter qualifications, the election board, balloting, counting, and disposition of ballots, and disposition of challenge ballots. It gives a little background about what I just discussed with Kenai Peninsula Borough and the election stakeholders meeting, and that, we are seeing more of a voter turnout. I think obviously last year had to deal with being 2020 and the presidential elections. But that's the goal, is to increase voter participation and to streamline the process. If you look under the briefing summary, it'll talk about just everything individually that's being amended, starting with that city clerk to administer elections, and that notice of elections will be amended. This is a big change that would mean that in the past, that notice of election resolution had to come to council to be approved before the notice for elections could be posted. This will take it out of the council arena. Council will still approve the judges by resolution and certify the elections by resolution, but that notice of elections now can just be posted directly by the city clerk instead of having to come to city council for approval, as it's a regular item that happens annually. It's a kind of a housekeeping piece that simplifies the process. Candidacy eligibility and declaration. This has come up in the recent years where our candidacy qualifications weren't clearly defined. So it just referenced the code 2.04010B, which spoke to the candidate needing to be a resident of the city for at least 6 months preceding the date of declaration. And now it's updated to, sorry if I could find that real quick. I should have cleared. Now it's updated to have that 6 months preceding the date of declaration, must be a citizen of the United States, must be a qualified voter of the city as defined under SMC 23207 voter qualifications, and a candidate shall provide proof of qualifications for office as required by the city clerk. So it just streamlines that process a little bit more. And then the next, sorry, these packets are kind of unwieldy. The next change is, I did specify that the declaration of candidacy procedures in the form of declaration will remain the same. 232060 was added to clarify the determination of eligibility. And that states that the city clerk shall determine whether each candidate for city office is qualified as provided by law. At any time before the election, the city clerk may disqualify any candidate whom the city clerk finds is not qualified and immediately notify that candidate by certified mail. A candidate who's disqualified may request a hearing before the city clerk within 5 days of receiving the notice. The hearing shall be held no later than 5 days after the request unless the candidate agrees in writing to a later date. There wasn't a process for determining eligibility in code previously or prior to this ordinance, so that'll help with that process. 232070 amends voter qualifications. Previously, the code specified that a voter must be, that the voter must be a resident of the municipality at least 30 days prior to the municipal election. But we didn't have an in code where we didn't have a way in code to determine if that person was a resident within city. There was no recourse for determination of whether that person resided or not. This follows along with borough and other municipal codes where that recourse is that you're a registered voter within city limits 30 days prior to election. So that shows that you're a resident. But of course, there's still the option to vote. I mean, we're not going to turn anybody away. It just would become a challenge ballot if they were not on the registration list, and then I would go through and determine whether they were a resident or not. Then election judges selected is amended to read election board and updates just the language to appoint judges as needed. So while you guys will do the main approval, if there's any last minute changes, it just clarifies that language that the city clerk can appoint a judge at the last minute if needed. The oaths was in there twice. It was stated that the election judges would come in and sign that they agreed to do their job. And then the day before elections that they would sign an oath to do their job. So now it's just once. You just sign the oath. And then balloting, we changed it from the specification of an X so that if we do end up using electronic machines or changing the way, making different voter accessibility changes in the future, it won't specify X. It will be, you can either mark the box, or fill in the box, X, check, all of those kind of, as long as it shows that you've made a mark on that box and one box, not multiple boxes, that vote will count because we do still hand count all our votes. And the last being just minor edits. I think those were little typos in counting and disposition of ballots, and disposition of challenged ballots. So sorry, that was a lot. If you have any questions, please let me know.
Okay, that was an earful.
Sorry.
No, perfect. Okay, any comments by council or questions?
Mr. Mayor, if I may?
Yep, go ahead, Vivian.
Yep, yeah, just compliments to Heidi for cleaning up this very important ordinance, and I'm ready to move forward with a motion. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions or comments? Okay. Harmony, was that you?
Yeah, I'd also just like to acknowledge Heidi's work here. Well done. I like the streamlined process.
Okay, thank you, Harmony. Looking for hands from the public. Any comments, questions from the public? And I do not see any on the screen. That'll take us back to council for final action, and I too will just share a comment. Yeah, I appreciate the work on this. You can tell by the amount of changes. Obviously, this needed some cleanup, and through your diligence, it looks like you've talked to a number of folks and came up with some pretty good solutions. And the one key takeaway that you talked about or a couple things, is streamlining the policy and then making it so that more people can participate in our elections. In no way, shape, or form is this intended to diminish voter participation. So I just want to make that real clear. So we'll go ahead and look for any final comments or motion to approve ordinance 21-10.
Mr. Mayor, I'll make a motion that we adopt ordinance 21-10.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Rojas, second by Sweat to approve ordinance 21-10. All those in favor, Sweat,
Aye.
Colbert,
Aye.
Morrison,
Aye.
Rojas,
Aye.
Peyton. Was that an aye? Sound like a squeak. Okay, motion carries 5-0. Ordinance 21-10 is passed. All right, we'll do the last one of item J before we take a quick break. This will be item J4, action memorandum 21-12, supporting the declaration of candidacy and appointment, if granted, of Rachel Friedlander as member of the board of directors for the Alaska Municipal League Investment Pool, otherwise known as AMLIP. And this is on page 124. And staff, if you want to give us a quick presentation.
Thank you, Mayor. AMLIP, which is run through the Alaska Municipal League, they have a position on their board open. I thought I should throw my name in the hat, considering we do put our money, invest our money through AMLIP. So I'm not sure if I'll get the position, but would appreciate support from council and trying to see if they would accept me.
Thank you. We'll open it up to questions, comments from council.
Mr. Mayor, if I may?
Yep, go ahead, Vivian.
Yeah, I'm in full support, Rachel, of you putting your name in the hat. Would it be something you would just do from Seldovia, or would there be travel involved?
Through the mayor, Councilmember Rojas, I think it is something that I could just do from Seldovia, but I'm not 100% certain. That's one of the beauties that COVID has made remote participation for rural communities a real deal. So I hope that I wouldn't have to travel for this position.
Okay, thank you. Yes, I think it would be in the well-being of Seldovia if she went on the board. Thank you.
Thank you, Vivian. Any other questions, comments? Bobby?
Yes, thank you, Rachel, for volunteering for this. Yeah, thanks.
Okay, any other questions, comments? Okay, I'll just offer a quick comment. Yeah, I too agree. I know AMLIP's important to us, and just the more we can understand it, where our money's at and what it's doing and how we do it. I think it's a good thing for the city. So I will also be in full support of this. And we'll go ahead and, any questions from the public or comments from the public? I do not see any hands up at this time, so we'll go ahead and bring it back to council for final action on memorandum 21-12.
Yeah, I make a motion to accept action memorandum 2112.
Second.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Sweat to accept action memorandum 21-12, second by Colberg. All those in favor, Sweat,
Aye.
Colberg,
Aye.
Morrison,
Aye.
Rojas,
Aye.
Payton.
Aye.
Okay, motion passes 5-0 to accept action memorandum 21-12. And we'll go ahead and take a short, let's call it a 10-minute recess here, and then we'll come back and finish up the meeting. And we're in recess. Okay, we got everybody back. We'll go ahead and call the meeting back to order here. Move down to item, let's see, K, unfinished business. We have none. Item L, new business, naming of Seldovia Police Department after Chief Anderson and next steps, and that's on page 140. We'll go ahead and have a presentation by staff.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, so 140 is the email from Chief Anderson's next of kin. This was in the last packet under the city manager's report, but we just wanted to have a more thorough discussion with council about the next steps. Per Chief Anderson's daughter, Donica, she says, thank you so much. This is an amazing tribute to my father. Weston and I would like it to be the Chief Andy Anderson Seldovia Police Station. We believe it is more fitting the PD be named after him and would leave the AW out, as everyone just knew him as Andy. Again, thank you so much for this honor. So the request from the family is just the police station, not the whole building. And if you look on page 142, amazing member of the public, Chris Costa, graciously volunteered to donate his work to the city for a plaque in honor of Chief Anderson. And so he created this out of birch, and the picture doesn't do it justice, but it's oiled and with a nice satin finish, and that will be here in the next couple weeks if that's the direction that the council would like to go. But then again, that's where we're at, is it will be up to council whether you guys still want to pursue naming the whole building or following the family's request and just doing the police department. The staff recommends that a resolution be brought forward. I think it's June 14th, when Andy or Chief Anderson's family will be in town. There'll be a memorial the weekend before. And so it would be fitting to have that resolution and with the naming of whichever entity this council chooses, with the family present, and maybe a little, I don't know, recognition or service, something to that effect. But what the staff needs from council is a direction on whether to continue pursuing naming the whole building or just the police department. And then it was discussed before putting that out to public for public comment. And so we still have enough time that we could put that out for the first few weeks of May, that the city council is considering naming, whether it be the building or the department, after Chief Anderson, and asking for public comment on the matter. And we could even bring that back at a meeting, maybe the end of May, or that first meeting in June, just what that public comment is.
Okay, thank you, Heidi. Questions, comments from council? John?
Mr. Mayor? Oh,
Hang tight, Vivian. John will go first here.
I would go with just the police department and the Andy Anderson on the plaque and the name. Thank you.
Thanks, John. Vivian?
yeah, I would say that I would be definitely in support of going with the family's wishes and just doing the police station for Andy. And great idea getting out for a public notice that we can get this rolling and have it ready for when the family's here. Thank you.
Thank you, Vivian. Bobby, did you?
Yeah, well, certainly, I think if the family wants, just the police station named after him, I think we should honor that. And I would like to see, especially when Donica's here, maybe we could have like a little, I don't know, attached plaque to the building, have a little ribbon cutting thing with some of
Public
that
dedication.
crime scene tape, and Donica and Weston will be here and we could have a little thing. I'd like to see that. Thank you.
Thank you, Bobby. Any other questions, comments from council? Yep, go ahead.
this plaque is going on the outside of the building, or is it going down here in the, where the rest of the plaques are? What's happening there? I must have missed it when Heidi was.
Yep, go ahead, Heidi.
Through the mayor, Mr. Morrison, this is a plaque that Chris Crasta has donated or is donating to the city. There hasn't been a determination of where it would be, but I think the idea was perhaps it would be outside of the building above the door somewhere, if it'll fit in that space.
Yeah, so it doesn't look like, it looks like it's 14, so it looks big on here, but it's 14 by 8. So it's fairly small, then like a little small portrait then basically. So
Aren't the rest of the plaques down here to the parts of the building that are dedicated to Shirley Giles? Isn't there a plaque down below?
Through the mayor?
yeah, you're-
Yes, but that's because the Shirley Jean Giles conference room is down below. The plaque is right next to it.
Okay. I would sooner see this maybe inside of the police station where it's going to be protected a little better than being out in the weather and the UV rays and that kind of thing. I think I would vote to have it inside. Maybe a plaque out or something with some carved letters or something, but the plaque itself even a little more protected.
Okay. And Clayton, you had a comment? I'll just have,
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, in response to this, I've been in contact with his daughter through some people, and we were trying anyway to get a picture at least to put up on the wall in there. So if that's where you would like it, there is a perfect, I mean, we have it set up for a wall that we were going to have his picture up there and anyway with something. So if that's where you'd like it, but I mean, it's up to city council and you guys where you put it, but we were going to do that anyway on the inside. So.
okay, perfect. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, if I may?
Yep,
Sorry.
go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say that's a point that just came up. I understand. I was under the understanding that we were going to mount on the outside of the building something saying that this is the Andy Anderson Police Department or something of the sort. So I would like to see something on the outside labeling the building. And then, of course, on the inside, I think a photo of Andy and then the plaque. But I was thinking it would be on the outside and possibly on the inside. Is that what council was thinking also?
Yeah, I think that's what from what I'm hearing, I think that's what we're looking at. I'd like to have some sort of lettering outside the police department and then, the plaque and stuff inside. If I'm not hearing any objection to that, that seems to what we're looking at. So, yeah, Pearlie.
I kind of would also like to see maybe a little brass or some kind of a placard that states years of service and something of that nature underneath the plaque, yeah, or above it or below it, but somewhere nice engraved.
Okay. Yeah, no, I like that idea too. Okay, any other questions or comments before we go to public comment? Okay, we'll go to public comment. Do we have anyone from the public that would like to? I see we do have a hand. Laurel.
Yeah, I just, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I believe that the gathering is Saturday, June 5th. And so if you were wanting to have that proclamation or resolution in place prior to that so that maybe it could be read at the gathering, then you would want to hit your last meeting in May. I could be wrong on that, but I somehow think it's June 5th and Bruce's is June 4th. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you, Laurel. Yeah, Heidi, you got a comment on that?
Yeah, just to clarify, thank you, Laurel. You're correct. That gathering is June 5th. However, the family is coming in just a few days before that and then staying through the month of June. So there could even be a special meeting to make that resolution and proclamation happening that just is the dedication or the dedication party. And we could swing it a few different ways, but I think that timing before the gathering would be a little tight, but we can speak to the family about that.
Okay. Any other questions, comments from the public? So is her hand still up then? Okay.
What do you think about the dedication at the gathering on the 5th? Is that inappropriate?
Yeah, that's what I wasn't curious either. What is, Heidi, are you saying yay or nay on the 5th?
We can speak with the family, but from what I understand that they were wanting to keep that family focused and oriented. We have offered to be a part of the ceremony or help out, but I think that that is going to be a family run event. I am more than happy to put that proposition forward. But we have been in talks with Donica, and I think that it would probably be more appropriate if the city held an event after.
Gotcha, okay. Okay. Yep, no, understood. That clears it up. Okay, so any other final questions, comments, or direction? We just need to get clear direction for the staff. Did you have something, Rachel? Okay. So, Heidi, it looks like then what, if we want to run that by, I think, you'll have to look at the scheduling to see what we can do, but yeah, I think I mean, if you want to talk to the family, but I think if they want to keep that event family run, we're fine with doing something on a separate date. And then based on what we heard council, probably the plaque, inside, and then look at some sort of lettering on the outside. And I think we're all unanimous in respecting the wishes of the family to just do the police department rather than the whole building. And then if you do want to, if you want to open it up for additional public comment, go ahead and do so. Any
Excuse me,
objections to that?
No, Mr. Mayor,
Bobby, you had
I just like a clarification. So the sign that's here, the Birchwood sign, is not going to go on the outside of the building?
No, I think it's going to go on the inside of the building, on the inside.
Has he treated this sign to be on the outside?
I don't know.
Well, that would be one thing we would need to ask, because if he's treated it to be on the outside, I think that's what the intention is with this sign.
Right. I can again just tell you now, it doesn't matter if it's treated or not. It probably won't hold up for very long. So
look at
So you're saying we should have two signs?
well, all we're saying on the outside is just letters or wording. I mean, this is a pretty nice piece to have destroyed on the outside. I guess if you wanted to put it in a glass case or something like that, you could do something like that.
Well, if we want it both on the outside and the inside, do we have to go through that whole talk again about it?
No, we just had that discussion. There's room on the inside for a perfect spot. Clay just talked about that somewhere for me. This is 14 by 7. It's that tall and that wide.
Right.
So it's basically a beautiful photo, memorial plaque that can go on the inside, and on the outside, we'd be just looking to get some lettering examples and do some lettering outside over the door. We'll have to look and see what that looks like.
Okay, well, I get that, but then, like I said, we probably still would have to talk about what kind of lettering, who's going to do that.
How about, let's go ahead and have staff bring us back some examples of some lettering.
I'd be more than willing to donate a really nice chunk of live edge slab that somebody could carve, chip, whatever. Dedicated Andy Anderson Police Department, something. I don't know if it has.
So we'll have to do some research out there. Maybe Clayton can help with the spot, how much room we have to work with out there on the lettering and stuff. So.
And again, something we didn't mention again is a brass placard of some type I would like to see underneath of this inside of the building.
Something with the, with, having his years of service on there.
service and-
Does that kind of clarify things? Okay, did you get everything, Heidi, on that? Okay.
Maybe do some research on brass or stainless or titanium or.
Yeah, like a
Something
brushed
look
nickel
nice.
or something might look nice on this one with the
Yeah.
coloring and everything.
We definitely want it to look.
Yeah.
Nice, and silver might be a better choice than brass.
Okay, we good? Okay. All right, we will, go ahead and that takes care of item L1 with staff direction. Item L2, Chinook sport fishing discussion, snagging in the Soldovia Harbor and then the Soldovia Slough Bridge. And this is presentation by staff.
Thank you, Mayor. This was a topic that Councilmember Rojas brought to our attention. So Councilmember Rojas, I'd like for you to introduce the topic.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, the Seldovia was included in the regulations of 2019 that included the Seldovia Slough as an open snagging year round, just like open ocean water. This is a problem that the Fish and Game is going to try to rectify, and then group efforts will also try to rectify this. But for this year, we have the problem and the issue that in the regulations, Seldovia Slough, which is, and all of Seldovia Bay, including the harbor and up the lagoon, is open for snagging. I brought it to the attention of the city manager for safety reasons. Having snagging open for 6 weeks of the run is going to be pretty rough if you're on the bridge or in the harbor. So the city's brought forth some solutions, but it's something that we hope to change but it will be in effect this summer and probably next summer. To me, it's a danger and a hazard to have it open that length of a time. Thank you.
Thank you, Vivian. And we'll go ahead, Rachel, go ahead.
So through the mayor, to add to what Councilmember Rojas touched on, apparently the topic will be discussed at the Board of Fish meeting in 2023. And in speaking with Fish and Game Representative Aaron Booz, his department contacted the Department of Natural Resources, and it is true that cities do not have any authority to enact fishing regulations. Cities lack the authority to do so, even when it comes to management of our own property. It's covered in Article 8 of the Alaska Constitution that the state has the right to direct the use of its natural resources, including fish and game. And so even though it poses a safety hazard in the harbor, a recommendation could be that we post signage that discourages but doesn't prevent that activity. It could be informational and encouraging people areas that are safe to snag, that don't compromise the safety of other people within the harbor. And then when it comes to snagging off of the slough, because a state road isn't involved, DOT actually has the authority due to transportation hazards to limit that activity within the state. So they can kind of trump DNR and say that it's a safety hazard for our traffic. So that would be something that we could pursue if council would like, and otherwise it could be that we develop a flyer, an informational sign or something at the harbor master's office that encourages people to snag in areas that are more user-friendly.
Thank you, Rachel. Go ahead and open it up to council for questions.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor.
comments. Yep, go ahead, Pearlie.
I've sport fished a lot of these rivers throughout the state, and this is kind of a unique setup here that we have to be able to fish off in that bridge. And what I've observed in the last few years that I've been here is on the downstream side, there's about a 4-foot spot that people can gather in. That's the hot spot. That's where the fish like to bite at. The people on the outside, as you progress down the bridge, you're kind of just hoping to get lucky. It's always a bit of luck when you're fishing. There's a certain area that gets corked off. Every time I've been there, once in a while I can worm my way in there, but it's pretty well taken up by locals that know exactly where that spot is. And the same thing happens upstream. It's a little wider, a little more options of being able to sport fish. I think the solution myself is, now that we have a great set of stairs that'll get us up and down onto that beach, eliminate the bridge. That eliminates the traffic situation, that eliminates the danger of kids running back and forth, and it kind of opens the river up to everybody, is just my opinion. Thanks.
Thank you, Pearlie.
I know I didn't make many friends that statement.
Mr. Mayor.
Yep, go ahead, Harmony.
So Vivian, I was wondering about, it's not an emergency order. I can't remember the exact terminology that you would use. So the next session that ADF&G will be having is 23. This is an ADF&G order. Am I correct? Because when we got opened up to the rest with the rest of the state in 19 through ADF&G. So we could put in potentially a request to ADF&G to repeal that order as an emergency request, which is like a short-term Band-Aid to the issue. I agree with you that I don't think that having it open to snagging for the entire fishing season is safe. I don't think it's very sportly either. But maybe that's something that we could look into.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, if I may.
Yep, go ahead, Vivian.
Yeah, the emergency order isn't going to fly. And actually, maybe Rachel, I think you had this conversation with Michael and maybe some higher ups, that what we've pretty much gotten out of the deal is that the only way this thing is going to change that fits the criteria for it changing, of which Fish and Game are also in support of it changing back to the way it was, is to go through the regulations. That would be filing in 2022 for the 2023 vote on it. Yeah, I talked to the different organizations, then the emergency declaration doesn't work, or the emergency order don't work in this case. And Rachel, if you found out something different, perhaps you could mention it. That's all I have for right now. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Vivian. Appreciate that response.
Thank you, Vivian. Yeah, Rachel, if you had something.
Yeah, through the mayor, I did not talk to Mike Booz specifically about emergency orders. The overall consensus is that we don't have the authority as a city to enact fishing regulations, and that this would need to come before the Board of Fish in 2023. And that is the soonest that we could do something. So we were encouraged to educate and post signs, possibly, I don't know if you want to use the word discouraging, but maybe informing people of other areas that are more safe for them to conduct that activity, at least in the harbor.
Yeah, thank you, Rachel. I'll just offer one comment. There is a petition process to take something, like Vivian was saying, to take something out of cycle, but it's hard to get that through the board, through the process, because you have to basically have you have to have findings that are supported, that constitutes an emergency, and the good, reasoning behind it. It's unfortunate it's set up that way, but they set it up so that basically there's so many areas in the state and regulations that they only have to deal with this every 3 years. So, which is every area is on a 3-year cycle. So, yeah, and EO authority, that, yeah, that's not an option either as they discussed. So, so it looks like 3 years to get it fixed in regulation, but I would agree that, maybe we do put up some signs, recommending people don't snag, you're going to get, I know it's going to be a tough one to enforce, there's nothing to enforce, but other than shaming someone into, go elsewhere, go snag elsewhere, if you're going to do it, not amongst the crowd of people that are trying to fish, reasonably, I guess. So, John, you have a comment?
Let me, just one question. Thank you. Am I mistaken in the, or what I've seen in the past? Isn't there a fishing period that snagging isn't allowed? And then they open it up?
Correct. This was a mistake. Yeah, they screwed up when they did this.
Nope, they did not. This is combined with something else.
Well, that's what I'm wondering. We're saying it's year round, but yet there is a time period when you can't snag. They let the sport fishermen.
That's what I'm talking about. Is the mistake here. In saltwater, it's not closed in saltwater.
This is not considered saltwater at the bridge, though.
They lumped it into the saltwater.
Okay, I'm done. Thanks.
All right, let's go ahead, John. Clear it up for us.
You know how I feel about fishing off a bridge. The state does not allow people to fish off a bridge anywhere in the state of Alaska, period. The city, in their infinite wisdom, thought it'd be cool to snag fish off the bridge. So they bugged the state, and the state said, it's all yours. And we've been through this before. Semi-low tide, California kid falls off the bridge, breaks their necks. Who's liable? The city of Seldovia. Does our insurance cover fishing off the bridge? That's the only reason they're fishing off the bridge here, is it's in a unique situation. Seldovia is liable for the bridge. The reason the slough is called saltwater year-round is because the Kenai Borough came up with this rule about building close to a river, doing anything close to a river, cutting a tree down. You own the property, you can't build within 150 feet of the river, you can't do this, you can't do that. Lo and behold, the city of Seldovia said, no, that is not a freshwater river. That's saltwater. Tide comes in, time goes out. A law that's been in effect for a lot longer than we've called that saltwater is that snagging is allowed year-round in saltwater. So you have the option, snag year-round off the bridge in your saltwater, or you say, okay, it's freshwater, pack your buildings up. If your building burns down, you're not going to build a new one on the slough, period. It's fresh water. It's governed by the borough and their environmental laws concerning fresh water. So in a way, we've dug this hole ourselves. And every one of you should remember when we got that put into effect, that the slough is saltwater. And we did that because of the borough law, the environmental laws governing freshwater. Everybody living along the slough would be severely affected by them rules. And I've said from day one on the council, move the smolt stocking to Lake Irene. You have a mile of beach to fish off of. You can go out there and snag all you want, and the most you're going to catch is saltwater. So it's the only option to get that snagging in the slough done away with and go back to the 2 months a year is to tell the borough, no, we don't want it to be saltwater anymore, or the state. We want it to be a freshwater slough. And then the borough is going to enforce the environmental river laws on the city or on the people living on the slough. You can forget building there. Anything happens to anybody along the edge of that road that has a house on the slough, their house burns down. You don't get to build a new one. There won't be any buildings in time along the slough because fresh water and because of them environmental rules they put in place. And every one of you should remember when we went to the state and had them say, change it to that it's salt water. So about the only option we have to make it where nobody's going to get hurt is to get the smoke to the outside beach, and you have a mile of beach to fish off of. Room for everybody.
Okay. thank you,
Mr. Mayor, if
John.
I may.
Yep, go ahead, Vivian.
Yep, just a couple of points. This, just to clarify, John, I'll correct you. And that was that when Fish and Game made this ruling, they made it just for the ease of making a lineated line from Bluff Point to Seldovia. And Seldovia was wrongly put into that situation. It was an error on Fish and Game's part. But beyond that, let's get back to what we're doing tonight. And that is that we need to, as a council, give the city office and support the idea that we try to put up signs. We can't direct anybody. We can't order anybody not to snag wherever they want to, but we can put up signs and ask people, if the council agrees, ask people to please refrain from snagging off of the bridge and down in the harbor. They can go all up in the lagoon. They can go anywhere they want in a boat or on land. They can snag wherever they want to according to the regs, but we're just asking that for safety reasons, that we don't snag for 6 weeks straight off of the bridge or down in the harbor to protect people. And I think with peer pressure and some signs that just politely request that you please don't snag here, I think people abide by that, some peer pressure, but that's the issue for right now and tonight. So if we can move forward on that, and the other we can deal with later at some other point with Fish and Game.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Vivian.
Mr. Mayor.
Okay, any other questions, comments before we go to the public? Okay, and I'm not seeing any hands up from anyone in the public. Okay, I'll bring it back to council and looking for direction for the staff on this. We can either offer some direction tonight. If we don't have a consensus on it, we can bring it back again to talk about it. But yeah, we're about 2.5 weeks away here, probably from the first fish being caught. So we should probably come up with something here tonight, what we want to do. Again, this is not a long-term fix. This is a short-term, some sort of short-term plan to try and help. That's all it's going to do. It won't be mandatory. It might just be, might help a little bit.
Mr. Mayor, if I may.
Yep, go ahead, Vivian.
Well, I was just going to say, I would, with the council's blessing, that we ask and direct the city staff, the city office to post signs down in on the harbor, walking down the harbor, just asking people, reminding people, please don't snag from the harbor, and then the same thing at the bridge. Those are the two danger zones area I see right off the bat. And it could be, it could go back to what it always has been, where you can open up snagging on the 23rd of June. At least then you're not doing it for 6 months. But I would just encourage the council to move forward with directing the city office to move forward with potential signage.
Yeah, and I think, Vivian, I would agree. And I think as part of that, I mean, you might want to just, just like any regulation, just preface it and, due to an error and,
right.
at the last board cycle, not making it complicated, but basically preface it with, yeah, it was an error. And we are asking the public not to, honor the old way and not snag during the traditional 6-week closed period. Something to that
Agreed.
effect.
I myself, I think I'd sooner see a sign that said the sport fishermen can use all the river and let the snaggers have the bridge. Because that is the old traditional way. I don't think, from what I understand is, as far as the old timers, Port Graham fly or English Bay fly, or I don't think, I don't think there was a whole lot of sport fishing that went on in them days, if we're looking for tradition. So why don't the sport fishermen go and sport fish the whole river and let the snaggers have the bridge?
Safety.
Safety for who?
Safety for the people who are, if you're open, I'm actually, this is not the, Mr. Mayor, I withdraw. This is not the time to have a debate
No, I
right now.
understand. I mean, we're not getting anything here. If you go down there and watch, it's outright a little scary when the snaggers start off the bridge. Because the only way you can snag there's lots of hooks flying there. So snagging just is inherently dangerous. It's fun, but it's inherently dangerous. So
I agree.
And that would be eliminated by shutting the bridge off and getting people off the state highway.
well, yeah, but we're not gonna fix that tonight.
Nope.
All we're asking for is for some direction here to fix an error that happened here on the last board cycle.
If I may.
Yep, go ahead, Rachel.
What I also, to add to that motion, council could direct the city office to investigate with DOT due to safety issues, removing the bridge from snagging, because that was one caveat where you could change the policy. Was on a highway. So in addition to posting signage, which I hope you would be patient, because any sign that we would post, I'd want it reviewed with Fish and Game, and then who knows what manufacturing a sign, how long that takes. So it most likely would be a flyer for a little bit, plus posting a sign near a state road. I don't know how hectic that would be, working with a right-of-way permit. So we'll do the best we can with the direction that council gives us, and we can report what we learn at the next meeting.
Okay, so does somebody want to make a motion? I mean, I'm based on what I'm hearing here, I don't think we're going to get anywhere here tonight. So we'll open it up. Well, motion or consensus. Something, we need something to give the staff some direction here on what we want to do.
Mr. Mayor, if I may.
Yep, go ahead, Vivian.
Yep, I would like to make a motion that we direct the city office to move forward with the potential of information-based literature going out to the public about the snagging situation or the errors that were set forward by Fish and Game. And what Rachel said earlier, let's include that, and that we contact DOT about the bridge and move forward in this short time period that we have.
I'll second that.
Okay, we have a motion from Vivian. You got all that, Heidi? Second by Pearlie. All those in favor, Sweat,
Aye.
Colberg,
Aye.
Morrison,
Aye.
Rojas,
Aye.
Peyton.
Aye.
Okay, motion carries 5-0. Good job on compromise. Appreciate that. Okay, that'll take us to item M, administration reports, treasurer's report, page 143 of the packet.
Mayor, if I may speak to it?
Yep, go ahead.
So the treasurer's report in your packet, that's pre-end of year adjustment. You'll be considering the mid-year adjustment ordinance at your next meeting. It was passed on the consent agenda for the first reading, so your second reading will be at the next meeting. And so it's just to show you the pre-end of year adjustment.
Okay, thank you. Anyone have any questions or comments on the treasurer's report this evening? Okay. And I know we do have a work session coming up here on Wednesday, so we will be getting pretty deep into some of this stuff. Let's go to item M2, city manager's report, and that'll be on page 160.
160, yes.
Go ahead, Rachel.
Thank you, Mayor. So I first wanted to thank staff for setting up the council chambers so well for our first in-person meeting in a few months. Really appreciate it. I also wanted to give council a verbal update on staff reports. So while we may not be having presentations from staff members every second meeting of the month, it was still my intention that you would have a written report from staff members. So I didn't give staff that clear direction, and so I expect to have a written staff report from the finance officer and the chief of police and public works and the harbor master the second meeting in May. Councilmember Sweat asked about this at the start of the meeting, and so former Mayor Dean Lunt was here, and it would have been great to have had him speak to it, but we had a staff member, Radzi, apply in conjunction with the harbor master for a Rasmussen grant for the Seldovia Cemetery, and we were successful in receiving half of the funds we requested. And so that grant, you'll have a resolution at your next meeting accepting the grant funds and the conditions of the grant. So it can only be used for the items that were listed in the application. And so we can have flexibility with the Seldovia Cemetery Committee and how they want to prioritize the use of those funds. And then I wanted to draw council's attention to an error regarding ordinance 21-11. I did not include in the summary page of the general fund standing with the amended budget, the unfunded COVID department or class. It is reflected in those documents, but it's not on the first summary page. And so at your next meeting, I'll have that corrected. And then I'm very much looking forward to our discussion on Wednesday regarding the FY22 budget. And then to go through the written report really quick. I'll skip over because I know we've had a long meeting, so I'll just try to address the top things. The Seldovia Public Library was having a meeting tonight, and they were going to review their reopening plan. I looked at their reopening plan to increase access to the library, and it looked very appropriate. So I applaud them for figuring out how to serve more people in COVID. I've been working with SVT on a grant initiative to have more bear safe trash enclosures placed throughout the city, and possibly also helping secure our garbage truck, because that is definitely not bear or bird safe. I draw council's attention to this with the community assistance funding. The city's been using the intergovernmental revenue that the state gives us every year to balance our budget, which is a risky move because the state, almost every legislative session, says they're going to cut it in half or take it away. And so unfortunately, it looks like for the FY22 budget, we will have to balance the budget with those funds, but I really want to keep harping on the city. Somehow we can figure out not to balance our budget with those risky funds. It was discovered by during our emergency drill meeting that we have a sat phone. We've always had, I don't know how many years we've had a sat phone, but we almost spent over $1,000 buying a new one. And because Mark James, our safety officer, knew about it, he saved the city quite a bit of money. And we have an activated plan now that costs the city a little over $500 a year to give us 200 minutes. And so that was one of the conditions that was raised for us to form a partnership with KBBI. If we lost all power, how would we connect with them if we lost internet, cell service, and electricity? So now we have a sat phone so that we could communicate with KBBI. And then we also have handheld radios, as well as the radio in our chief of police truck that can communicate with Homer Dispatch. And so that also is an option for emergency communication. At the last meeting, Councilmember Payton asked about lights being on in terms of trying to save energy for the city. And so when I spoke with our operator, Jordan Cameron, about that, he's going to look into what maintenance all the lights might need. Most street lights, I learned, are operated with photocells that have unfortunately failed, which means the lights remain on all the time. So that it's on the list of the many things to look into. On March 16th, the mayor and I met with the SURSA president, Mark Janes, and then Administrator Lisa Stanish to kind of hash out what a partnership between the city and the SURSA could look like. That's still a work in progress, and so we'll share any updates in that regard as they move forward. And then we did submit a letter to the state regarding the city's support for ATVs and snowmobiles, and that's included in the packet. Executive Director Tim Dillon wanted to make sure that you saw the CAPED COVID-19 Business Impact Survey was out. And so they're looking for this city and any community members to fill that, complete that survey. And then last but not least, we were missing a cutting edge. Our harbor master found the cutting edge. She's just was looking and it was like down on the, I don't know if you'd call that the breakwater, but it easily could have fallen into the ocean, and she found it. So it was very good news to receive that day. So I'm open for questions. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Rachel. Any questions on the city manager's report? Okay. Looks like we might have lost Vivian there too, huh? Okay. All right. Item M3, Chief of Police report none, Harbor Master's report none, Public Works report none. As the city manager just stated. Item N, informational items not requiring action. We have a city council budget work session that will be held this Wednesday, April 28th at 4 p.m. Item O, executive session none. Item P, council and mayor comments concerning items not on the agenda. Sweat.
Thanks to all you guys for all your hard work again. And thanks for everybody that attended tonight. And thanks to Dr. Zink for being here again. It was great.
Okay, thank you. Colbert.
Yeah, thank the staff for all their hard work, HEA and Dr. Zink. It's been a good meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Morrison.
Yeah, great meeting. It's been informative and it was nice to have HEA here and all that stuff. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. And it looks like Vivian is off. She dropped off the call here. Peyton.
Yeah, good meeting. Thank you, staff, and the public presentations that we had Laurel and HEA, and we had Jan as our volunteer coordinator. Anyways, just thank you. Great meeting. Looking forward to Wednesday.
Okay, thank you, Harmony. Yep, I'll echo the same thing. Thanks everyone for attending. Thanks for the spirited debate and discussion as always. And thank you to the staff for all the work you guys did for this meeting here. And I'll look for a motion to adjourn.
Make a motion to adjourn.
We have a second? Second. Any objection? No objections. We are adjourned.
Bye, Pearlie. Bye, John.
Good night, you guys.
See you guys.
Good night, Harmony.